Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Fake Nerds Watch. This is Fake Nerds Watch for Doctor Who. This is our second special as we go through the final David Tennant material and the entire Matt Smith run of Doctor Who. I'm Brandon C. McClure, and joining me on this journey through the time vortex is Sparkz Whitty, who just muted himself.
That's true. Yes, I'm here also.
And Xander Hake.
I was a companion, but the episode got lost.
Oh, that's terrible. That's terribly sad.
I did just catch at the beginning of your Lower Deck stuff of Brandon forgetting you'd ever been on Fake Nerds Watch before.
Yeah, I did entirely. Just forgot about that. But we're here to talk about, very excitedly, here to talk about Doctor Who. So we're going to talk about the the end of the Tennant era, and then all of the Matt Smith era. Let's just why don't we just get right into it? Once again, these are just kind of our general thoughts going through it, but we'll start with the Tennant stuff because, start at the beginning. Where do you guys? Let's start with the next Doctor.
Yeah. Did everyone else forget that there was like a giant mech, like Godzilla type Cyberman?
Yeah.
That just exists.
Yes.
I forgot that was a thing.
The Cyber King.
I saw a picture of it and I was like, oh yeah, that did happen.
I forgot all about that. I forgot about the Cyber Shade. I forgot about everything.
The Cyber Shade. Yeah, the next Doctor is a weird one. We were talking about it before we started recording, that it is in this kind of like special era where they were just doing David Tennant specials to wrap up his era. And it for some reason gets lost in that conversation. And it's not a bad episode. I kind of like it. But it's definitely, I don't think anyone talks about the next Doctor as like, boy, howdy, that was a really good episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah, I think it just gets overshadowed by the other Christmas specials and then the other Tennant farewell specials.
Yeah.
Which most people don't think it's part of, which I'd even argue that it isn't.
Yeah, I do remember not know, because Matt Smith hadn't been cast by the time the episode had aired. We wouldn't know he was going to be the next Doctor, and so we thought there was a good chunk of people who were like, "This is how we're introduced to the next Doctor." Yeah, this is who that's going to be, and they fooled me for a moment, honestly.
Yeah, it was interesting because like everybody thinks it's going to be the first two Doctors at the same time story, and it's the next Doctor. But it's very much not. It's very much not that. It also comes at an interesting time because David Morrissey, who plays the Jackson Lake, who thinks he's the Doctor, was like just I think around this time about to hit his fame for The Walking Dead, or not too far along.
Yeah, I think so too.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Because he was going to
weird.
What was interesting about that is that David Morrissey was in an episode, so he was the star of a series that I stupidly love, which is called Blackpool. And David Tennant was in that series as well. So it was kind of a Blackpool reunion episode in a way. I thought that was kind of fun. But
I looked it up. My ears are way off. Morrissey wouldn't hit The Walking Dead for a little while.
I think you're right, Sparkz. Oh, interesting. Just a heads up, my internet's acting up for some reason. So if I have any trouble, pick up the slack.
You're a little robotic,
but I do want to talk about
it plays really into the Cybermen thing.
Am I really that bad?
It comes in waves.
The next Doctor is fun and all, but I want to talk about Planet of the Dead.
Sure. Yeah.
Because Planet of the Dead is Is it right to say it's my favorite special when The End of Time is very good?
I mean,
think
like
it might be.
you're allowed. Like it I feel like The End of Time is just kind of unfair in comparison to pretty much any other special, just because it took so much time to just wrap up his story, which I think the other doctors don't really get as much. They get kind of
Mhm.
like a final arc and then a final episode, but it's not like they have these really dedicated like specials. Um yeah, I think that kind of sits in a class of its own. So I think having like a special that's separated from that's your favorite is totally reasonable.
Okay, because it rules. And I did not remember that it ruled until I recently rewatched it.
Oh man, I feel like I've been watching some of 13 stuff or 14,
Mm.
and I haven't been able to like go back and watch as much as I want to, especially after the last time we did this.
Sure.
You just
So,
saw it. Give me a quick
Yeah.
so this is the episode with Michelle Ryan as Lady Christina D'Souza, who is a jewel thief. And they're in a double decker bus that gets accidentally shunted to another planet that's completely barren. And Dana Kaluuya was in this episode. Fun fact, which is wild.
Happens all the time in
But
Doctor Who.
it's insane. It's wonderful watching Doctor Who and being like, right, Andrew Garfield, Daniel Kaluuya.
The thing is,
Cyborg is in something.
the thing is, like, contextually, it's not that surprising when you think about the fact that like British stars have taken over so much of our AAA or A-lister category for films. So like, yes, of course they show up more in Doctor Who than they would appear anywhere else because that's the popular British show.
Yeah. And so Planet of the Dead, I think mostly I like it so much because of Lady Christina, who I tweeted about this the moment like after I watched the episode, is like should have been the companion, like should have been a companion. Like if David Tennant had gotten another season, which didn't happen obviously, but if he did, it I would love it to have been Lady Christina. And have that be a season long like companion. I think that would have been great. I think she's incredible in the episode. Her and David Tennant are wonderful together. It's a surprisingly strong episode for something just like in the beginning of this kind of farewell tour, you know.
You know what? I don't think I ever saw this special.
Really?
That's incredible. That's kind of amazing. Yeah, Michelle Ryan's really cool. I was already familiar with her going into this because I'd watched the entire attempt at rebooting Bionic Man into Bionic Woman with her at the time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I went into it with that knowledge, and I was also watching Merlin around then. So I think she's very good. I think the story is really good. I think it's just a well done piece. I don't disagree that I think like there was a time where she could have been a good companion on the show, and they just didn't go that way for one reason or another. But it's okay because she ends up in the radio shows, so whatever.
Yeah, there are quite a few Big Finish episodes that she appears in. She even has her own Big Finish series that I'd love to listen to. So beware of that coming, Sparkz. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like I was just enamored by it. Like the end of that episode when she's flying off in the bus and she's like, "We could have been great together, you know." And David Tennant just looks up and goes, "Oh, Christina, we were." And I'm just like, "Yeah, you were great together. Hell yeah, man!" Like I'm in love with this episode. I'm in love with Lady Christina. I loved it so much.
To the best of
Not
your
yeah.
To the best of your ability, Brandon, can you tell me how good you think the show is, putting aside her? Like, how great do you think the special is as like a full story, kind of separating at least the actor being good in the role? I know you can't. I know you can't remove the role from the story necessarily, but like, try and strip away the actor from it.
That's a really good question because there's a lot of things I like in this episode, not just Lady Christina. Like it's also trying to find I want to find his name real quickly. Lee Evans as Malcolm, which is the kind of this bumbling unit scientist. I think he's great. There's a lot of like cutbacks to him where they're just on the phone and he's just really quirky and fun. I also really I do like the story of like these kind of like these like these like flying stingray that like circle the globe over, and like as they circle the globe they eat everything in sight and then create a wormhole to another planet and then do the same thing again. All that's really interesting to me. Like I
It sounds great.
It does. It's a fun episode. Like it's difficult to kind of just like to take away. But like if I think about it, like everything in this episode kind of really works for me. It's probably not a great special, but it does work for me. I really like it. I like all the elements of it. And like the bug captain, who just like dies. And like his bug friend is like, oh, I'll avenge you. Like it's silly, it's weird, it's Doctor Who at its best, I think.
What I'll say is I think where it benefits is that it doesn't feel this and Waters of Mars, I think are better specials than your usual non-Christmas special because they don't feel like specials. They just feel like competent episodes of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
There's maybe a little bit more weight on them, but like not by a lot. They're not trying to like carry as much as I think, for example, End of Time or The Power of the Doctor or The Day of the Doctor, things that we're going to get into.
Yeah, but I really like The Waters of Mars.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? That's what I'm saying. Is Planet of the Dead and Waters of Mars are just like barely slightly elevated, really good episodes of Doctor Who. And I think it's because like they don't feel like they're carrying the same burden that a lot of the specials do. Like
right.
They're not bringing it back any major characters. You know, everybody's just new. If anything, I think what's special about them is that they're one of our only ones where the Doctor doesn't have a companion at all traveling with him and is with someone who's totally like new to him. You know, that is not a Christmas special. That is not a Christmas special. I will caveat that.
Yeah.
But
did we lose him?
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, like it doesn't carry the same burden of having to like even the like specials that are happening right now as we're having this discussion with the return of the 14th, the return of David Tennant as the 14th Doctor and everything. Yeah. They have a different burden. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying like these just feel like solid, well-structured episodes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Waters of Mars is also underrated in that sense because I don't remember liking Waters of Mars when I first watched it. Not that I like hated it or whatever, but like there's just something about it that I just haven't remembered well. But going back to it, like it's a solid episode still, like this, but also that one's dealing with a lot of heavier material because it's dealing with the idea of like this is a fixed point in time that the Doctor cannot be here for, and then you know the caveat at the end being the lesson that he learns at the end is like I can do whatever I want. There are no Time Lords anymore. I'm the only one. And it's a really powerful episode that he gets into, like the end when he's trying to save everyone and the girl and the captain is trying to like kill everyone because like that she knows that's how this is supposed to happen is really powerful stuff.
It's one of those things. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Xander, please.
I think I specifically like it with how strong of a lead it is into the End of Time. Because he has this like he starts kind of like going on this power trip as he like, you know, that God complex that he kind of has like starts playing stronger in his head. He's like, oh, I changed this. It's fine. I can do whatever I want. And then the woman that was supposed to die kills herself.
Yeah.
and he realizes that like the power he has to control, quote unquote, is he still can't control people. And it's like this beautiful point where it's like he knows that like he can affect change, but like he can't change the outcomes other people want, no matter how like powerful he is. And was just, I don't know, it's this kind of this dilemma that has been, I think, goes further into the 11th Doctor, and a little bit into the 12th. I think mostly 11 deals with it, is that ramification of like, I have all this like anger and hurt and power in me, and we're seeing that seep out a little bit more because Tennant has dark episodes, but it feels like he's trying to like keep that under wraps. And then 11 with Matt Smith, what was it, Matt Smith? Not Matt Smith.
Yeah.
Oh, Matt Smith. With Matt Smith, it's like, I'm just going to pretend that everything's okay and nothing's wrong. And that same stuff I'm pushing down is still going to come up, but hey, it's fine because we're fun now.
Yeah. I really like The Waters of Mars. And in particular, I, like many others, really like it for its ending. Other things about the story are very good, but that ending has stuck with a lot of people. And been an often thought of and remarked upon part of Tennant's tenure as the Doctor.
Victorious.
It's almost impossible for me to look back on this and not wish that the placement of this was different. I think what's great about The Waters of Mars is undercut by the fact that the next special is the end of time.
Yeah.
And like, if you want to get down the line technical, for David Tennant, the next thing that happens to him is the Day of the Doctor. And those things don't feel like they fit with where we leave him at the end of Waters of Mars, outside of like the obvious seeing Ood Sigma and being like, is this when I die? And saying, no, I don't want to die yet. But I feel like the weight of the thing that they hit at the end with her killing herself for what the Doctor did is not, it's not the lingering thread that I'd want it to be. And especially considering they knew they were doing these Tennant specials, I truly feel Waters of Mars should have come first and Planet of the Dead second. And I didn't even need you to change a lot in Planet of the Dead to just at least, but it would be maybe a little less fun than it is, but only a little, just to have the Doctor carrying the weight of what just happened into the Planet of the Dead story. And I don't think it needs to like do anything as a story to directly contradict what just happened to the Doctor. But I think we needed to live with the Doctor in that moment in the next story before the story is about David Tennant leaving the show, which I love the end of time. But it is more about saying goodbye to David Tennant than it is about saying goodbye to the 10th Doctor.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I see that. I guess the way that like, and it's I think less of a strong point and is more of just thematically there. I like the fact that a lot of the, I don't want to go, trying to like escape death and everything, thematically I think plays really well with the end of The Waters of Mars.
See,
he's trying to change someone else's fate because he's trying to change his own.
Absolutely. That I agree with. I think I would like the connective tissue of the two better if there wasn't the implication that the Doctor had a set of adventures, at least one, in between the end of Waters of Mars and the end of time. If he literally spun from the end of Waters of Mars into the end of time, I would feel differently.
Right. No. And it totally valid point. I'm just saying that like this is the kind of like saving grace connection wise.
Sure.
That I see, which is why, previously I'm seeing
to your point, while I like that as a connective thread of like why he did what he did, the problem that I have in what you're saying is the problem with my placement of it, that very quickly the story is not about what happened to her. or what happened to other people because of what he did. It's about him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, it is, you're right to point out that, like, he's trying to force her to avoid her fate to avoid his own. But it becomes about him more than about what he did because of that fear.
Right. Yeah. You're right. Another episode to kind of like explore that sentiment a little bit more makes sense. It does feel when it jumps from one to the next that it kind of like only takes half of the experience.
Right.
Well, because the idea of like the Time Lord victorious is utterly fascinating. Like this idea that the Doctor is now thinking that the rules of time don't apply to him at all. He's always broken rules, but he's always kind of been like, you know, I can't change fixed points. Like it was the Pompeii episode. Like I can't stop the volcano from exploding. But he knows like I can still save someone. So like I can fudge the rules, I can change history, I can do what I want, but a fixed point, I can't do anything about that. And I shouldn't do anything about that because the consequences will be dire. And to finally kind of be like, no, I can do this. And what's interesting about that is for me is the 7th Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, was also trying to play in the space of like, what if the Doctor just decides that he's going to change things. He's going to change things for what he thinks is the better. And it was kind of, at the time, it was meant to be that this is how he becomes the Valeyard, which is an evil version of the Doctor, a future version of the Doctor. But Sylvester McCoy didn't get a lot of time to do that because the show was canceled. So then we try again with almost that kind of same sentiment of with 10, but we don't get to live with it. We are given it and then we're immediately taken away. And I would have liked to have lived with it more. And there is a sense that Smith, his first season especially, is still playing in this kind of like Time Lord Victoria space, but it's not enough. He's still this kind of like kooky Doctor. I think I'm with Sparkz that I would have much rather have lived with the Time Lord Victorious on a more kind of a seasonal arc kind of thing.
I just think that there's a lot of weight to the implications of the moment, and I feel like the scene itself has to wrap up so quickly. Like the moment after she's shot, we're kind of supposed to take like, oh no, I went too far, as the like, oh okay, he's processed all that, he can move on now. Because we have to put that emotional progress on pause because David Tennant's about to leave the show. So let's go do his wrap up special, guys. We'll pick up this idea again, maybe kind of sort of later. And I don't find that satisfying. It feels like an idea that Davies wanted to explore, but never found the right time to do it. And so kind of shoehorned it in right before the end of his time.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it might be something we go back to now. Without getting too far into like what's going on currently with the Doctor, and we'll talk about how we get there and everything later, but the Doctor is more untethered from Gallifrey than ever before. So you could explore some of that again, if that was something that he was even interested in, but that was also a long time ago. I'm sure he has other things that have come and gone since then that he'd rather explore, not to mention not wanting to retread waters that, whether as explored fully or not, as Brandon said, were brought up in Smith's era. And I do think Smith is living in a response to this episode to an extent. Like as they, you know, Moffat is a shrewd writer. I won't say he's a great showrunner, but he is a shrewd writer. And even though he'll hit you over the head with the point, I think when he says that, you know, when we get down to the Day of the Doctor, like Matt Smith is the one who forgets. And I do think that's very poignant. Like Matt Smith feels like a character running away, not from like the fear of his fate, but from the fear of like what the Doctor can be. Like he's chasing fun.
Yeah.
Right. In response to this, I don't want this. I don't want this kind of adventure again.
Yeah.
I just think there were ways, just real quick. I think there were ways where you could have worked in more of this being a part of Tennant's farewell instead of just like, and this kind of goes back to the point I was saying about End of Time, which I love. Doesn't feel like a farewell of that Doctor as much as it does feel like we're really sad Tennant's and Davies are leaving.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's more about the behind the scenes, like for the fandom farewell, than it is about like the 10th Doctors. Like I would say, like this is much the point, right? The Waters of Mars is the thing that makes me feel this way. 10's story doesn't come to a full conclusion. We just are moving on.
Yeah, that's a good point, because if we kept the same showrunner but Tennant still regenerated, then we could the same showrunner could carry the story into the next regeneration. But because we're also changing showrunners, that story is just kind of cut off at the knees.
Yes, and I feel like there was a way, if you weren't so focused on like we're saying goodbye to Davies, who got Doctor Who back into pop culture, we're saying goodbye to Tennant, all that stuff. If you weren't so mired in that, you could bring the elements of this into that end of time story, right? Like there's room for it. It's just not what the focus of that was, so it just kind of has to get cut out at the knees here. And that's my biggest thing, is that Waters of Mars is great, but that ending feels like emotionally rushed because we can't get into it. We just don't have the room to do so.
Yeah, it's a good point. Waters of Mars, though, is still a really solid episode.
Absolutely genius.
Yeah, it's terrifying. The monsters with this constantly wet creatures. Really fascinating. I love it.
I remember when the first trailer for it came out, and I had this like just deep hope in my soul that somehow Jenny was going to be in it, because I just wanted it, and she never comes back for that.
There is kind of a look about it that kind of like harkens back to the look of her episode, that you're kind of like, oh, maybe.
Yeah, I really thought maybe we do it, but no.
She sounds great.
Jenny? Do you not know who we're talking about?
The Doctor's daughter, Jenny.
Oh, okay. Got it. I was thinking...
Yeah, the war...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I was just thinking of the previous episode.
Christina.
No, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, not her. Not her. The Doctor's daughter, Jenny, David Tennant's wife in real life.
Yeah. It's really... For how much fan outcry there was for that, it's wild that there wasn't even a nod to it.
I know. I just listened to Once in Future, which is the Big Finish 60th anniversary, and she did an episode, which is really fun.
Which Doctor is she with?
She's with the 5th Doctor, her actual real father.
Dad, right? Yeah, got it.
Yeah,
cool.
That's cool.
So the End of Time is I think a phenomenal 2-part episode. That has so many elements that I really like. We finally see the Time War, like in a sense. We don't really see it in the same kind of way that we will come to know it later, but we see the Time War and what the High Council of Gallifrey, led by Rassilon, which is a big reveal that Rassilon is alive, because he was
and
dead
Timothy
in the
Dalton
series. And Timothy Dalton as Rassilon. I love Timothy Dalton as Rassilon so much. This idea of like, we've got a plan. Let's make the Master crazier, and let's see how that works.
Yeah.
I really like this episode, and like, look, the companion is Wilfred Mott, and like,
no, that was. I love his character. I've always like it's so he's so like comforting, like there's that level of wisdom where he's like able to see the Doctor as like this old guy.
Yeah.
I think rather than like pretty much everyone else in his run that, sees him in the way he wants to present himself. And he's just kind of like, yeah, I see it. You're ancient.
Yeah. I think Bernard Cribbins is very, very special in his performance of Wilf, and particularly here, like, I don't find it fair to compare companion, like when ranking companions, the singular story companions against like whole season arc companions, but like in a general sense, there's no beating Wilfred Mott. Like there's just people, like I talked about this on the podcast when Bernard Cribbins passed away, and whenever someone shares the meme footage from this special of him like crying and doing his goodbye like hand reach over his mouth and all that, instant tear up moment. Like, just yeah, cool. Reopening my trauma. Thanks, guys. Like, great.
Oh.
Wilfred Mott is all of us. And this is the thing, is like, just real quick, and then I'll turn the mic over.
Yeah.
I am criticizing that, like what I was saying earlier, which is like, I don't think the End of Time fully tells like a proper end to the 10th Doctor's story. I don't know that it really nails that for me. What I do think it does, and I do think it rightly does, is anticipates the fandom's deep appreciation and connection for both David Tennant and Russell T Davies. And as a farewell to both of those creative spirits of Doctor Who leaving the series, that is very emotional and very powerful and very present. Mm-hmm. And like, in that sense, Wilfred Mott is everybody.
Yeah. So this episode, by the way, Martian Manhunter from Supergirl is in this episode.
Brian Cox is in this.
Brian Cox is in this. Yeah. Wait, Brian Cox is in this?
He's the voice of the Elder Ood.
Holy shit! I had no idea.
It's a crazy cast list if you look at it.
Yeah, Timothy Dalton, who is James Bond, showing up as Rassilon for these 2 episodes. There's a lot of what I really like about this episode is contextualizing the Time War as this kind of like, we knew that the Time War was between the Daleks and the Time Lords. That was what we've always known. But this also is like, Wilf is like, well, if your people come back, isn't that great? And he's like, by the end of the war, my people were just as bad as the Daleks. Like, this would be bad. This would be just bad if they came back. And especially like what we learn later in the Day of the Doctor is not specifically the Time Lords, but the High Council of Gallifrey, Rassilon and them. Mm-hmm. They were ready to enact a plan that was going to destroy the universe, that the Doctor had to stop. And if they came back, Rassilon would enact that plan again. Like, there was no question in his mind. So him trying to like stop the Time Lords is a really interesting place to put the Doctor in post the Time War, having this idea like, yeah, I destroyed the entire Time Lords. Oh, they could come back? Not on my freaking watch. Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
I like that dichotomy that we see.
Yeah, it's a really interesting setup of us anticipating, oh, this should be great for him, and he's like, this couldn't be worse. And obviously, bringing John Sim back is a genius stroke. I love him even more here than I did in season 3. He's just excellent.
His beam ability that he keeps doing is pretty fun.
That whole sequence of like, I need fat, I need meat, I need all the angles and everything. I think about it all and like the banging on the trash can to get the Doctor's attention, and the anticipation that everyone had for the Fornox. It's all very, very well constructed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
God, that Fornox thing. The real like it. There's so many gut punches in the like later half of part 2 that just it's one out. It doesn't stop. Like, to have Wolf do those knocks and he's like, oh, it's over, I won, and turn around and just the like just coming to terms and realizing everything and being like, yeah, of course, I get it.
He has this is also the first time that we get this perspective of regeneration, which I really like, which is that like, we've always kind of already known this, that regeneration changes their brain chemistry, because the Doctors are often different than what they were before. There's always kind of this idea that they are carrying a through line, but sometimes, but like most of the time, they are distinct, different characters. And what I really like is like this perspective of like the Doctor being like, he says, well, you can't die, right? You'll regenerate. It's like, well, I can die. If they kill me before I regenerate, then I'm dead. The regeneration takes time. And then he's like, even so, it feels like dying. I die and then someone else walks away in my place. is such a kind of sad look at what regeneration is. That I really appreciate that we'll keep getting that throughout the regenerations that'll come later. This idea that like the Doctor is like, I don't know if I want to regenerate because like I kind of liked being who I am, and why don't I just die the way I am?
This is also attached to very much like something that Eccleston has, but Tennant, I'm not going to say perfected, but he definitely personified it more than Eccleston had the opportunity to, of an emotional connection to the Doctor that doesn't exist in the classic age.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, again, kind of going back to the idea, like, this is more about the audience saying goodbye to Tennant than it is about the 10th. And I think like all the other things after that have wanted to more acknowledge for an audience that would have Matt Smith or Capaldi or Woodacre or Tennant, whoever else as their favorite Doctor. This is tough for you. I'm sorry, you have to say goodbye to your friend.
Yeah.
And like I think this was a way to incorporate that idea, and I think they do it very lovingly, very, very well in End of Time. And I think like Davies has this big book he wrote when he was ending everything back then. And he talked a lot about how he views the Doctor regenerations. I'm paraphrasing because it's been a while since I read this, but he views the Doctor's regenerations as reincarnations, but with a continuous memory. And so like that's the only change, right? Like you are fundamentally a new, in like traditional reincarnation, you're just a new being, but like you have a continuous through line of memory. But otherwise you are like wholly becoming something else.
Yeah. Xander, you're trying to say something?
No, I like the kind of the precedent that Tennant's like final goodbye in the TARDIS sets for the following Doctors, where it's like, sure, they don't get an entire like goodbye special, but they do get to say goodbye as they regenerate.
Yeah.
It's like they get their like send off. They're like, here's my love for the character. Here's my character speaking about dying. Here's like me speaking about not being on the show. It's like this really cool like meta narrative that still totally works in the canon narrative. Yeah, I like that it kind of started that and that it's kept going.
Yeah, and then regenerations get longer and longer. Not just
Tennant,
like the physical act, but how long they have to say goodbye.
Yeah,
something that I really like. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Sarah Jane Adventures, because in this time, Sarah Jane Adventures was in its, I believe, 3rd season, and there's an episode with David Tennant in it, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about a Matt Smith episode that is in the 4th season, because at the end of this episode, David Tennant, we see him go through the Davies companions. We see him like say goodbye to them.
Except for Rose, who he just looks at from a distance. Right.
He says because he sees the past version of Rose, whereas he sees kind of the present version of each one. One of my favorite things that Davies did with Matt Smith is that he revealed that it wasn't that the Doctor didn't just go through his previous couple companions. He saw them all. He went back to see them all from the beginning. And that kind of like context that's lived in my brain since I've watched since. So like watching this episode feels even more impactful, seeing the Doctor kind of be like, where is everyone now? Did I leave them in good places? And like, was I good to them?
That's a fair and fun thing to bring up, especially because like a lot of people think like Davies just hasn't touched the franchise again after End of Time. But that's not true. He writes Matt Smith's episode for Sarah Jane, which is really interesting. And hard not to connect to, what's happening like right now, not to get very spoilery, but like it's Tennant back, but it's the 14th Doctor. And there is a criticism even from Donna of like, you never check in. Like you like, what do you ever like even as the Doctor went and did exactly what he does at the End of Time, like not everybody sees him. not everybody sees that he's checking in on them and looking at them, and there's no moment of like deep connection. It's just kind of like some of them don't even know what they're looking at, who they're looking at. Like that's not, it means something for the Doctor, but like there's still that like I think idea, and I'll say like this is picking up on something specifically from the end of Whittaker's run that is carrying over, that I think Davies is doing on purpose. Literally in her last special, there's a lot of criticism of the Doctor not ever following up on the lives of the people who travel with them. And I do think that's something that Davies had on the mind then that still has on the mind now. So I think we're going to see more of that.
You got to imagine like it's been on his mind since Sarah Jane came back, right? Because even Sarah Jane talks about that.
I think it's that, but I think it's also the criticisms he got about where he left Donna.
Sure.
And the circumstances Donna was under, which is one of the reasons to come back. It's like I think there's a deeper interest these days now. The show's old enough in its modern age, as well as like adding in the classic age, to kind of criticize the Doctor needing to consider from their perspective what that feels like, because that's long gone. And then like you think about things like we're going to get into it in a moment, but like Matt Smith's 11th Doctor will stay with Amy and Rory for longer than he stayed with anybody and check in on them. And like what makes them get such treatment that the others don't, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll say that. I just want to wrap up at the end of time real quickly, so we can move into Matt Smith. But all in all, I think it's a very strong episode. It's a very gut wrenching episode that wraps up the Davies era nicely. I like all the supporting cast. It's very exciting. Murray Gold's top form. Love Murray Gold's music here.
I want to highlight just one particular. Sorry. I want to highlight just one particular element, which is the bit where Will says, "Take this gun. Don't let them do this to you, because you're the most wonderful man, and I don't want you to die. So take this gun," because Wilf is a soldier, and that's ultimately the perspective he falls back to, which I think it's a very. While I will say, like, I don't think all of 10's story stuff was closed, Davies' stuff he did with the Doctor, I think, is very poignantly touched upon. Like, there's obviously a lot of elements that he enriched Doctor Who with as a showrunner and that carry over into the future. But the point of not just like now the Doctor doesn't like guns or that kind of thing, but the focus on it, the focus on the Doctor constantly refusing those kinds of weapons, denouncing those, weapons. It's very much like what Davies was doing at the time. This is very like, how do you make Doctor Who a phenomenon at its time when it is coming back for its revival? You are creating a male hero who refuses, not just doesn't use, but refuses force as a way to solve the problem. And that's just so rare in the space of pop culture at the time and even today. But it is one of those things I think is an ultimate central catharsis for him. So to see it kind of get its button in End of Time, I think is really excellent.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good scene. Well, why don't we move into Matt Smith's era then? If there's nothing more you guys want to add about the end of David Tennant, maybe final thoughts about David Tennant as the 10th Doctor.
I mean, he's still going to be around in our conversation, so it's hard to. I mean, he's great. I have recently started to question if he is in fact my favorite Doctor or if he's my favorite actor to play the Doctor.
Me too.
And I'm really having to weigh that about what I value in a story about the Doctor. But I do think he's the most emotionally relatable, and I'll say that. And that always will draw me in. He's one of the greats.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a common opinion. That's why they keep bringing him back out.
I just want to say he's never been my favorite. Paul McGann has been my favorite. Just want to throw that out there. No, but I kind of agree, Sparkz, that I've been questioning how much I like the 10th Doctor, especially in relationship to the 14th Doctor, which we'll talk about it when these happen. But like, I think I'm I think I've fallen in love with the 14th Doctor in a way that I didn't with 10. And there's Capaldi, who I love. But man, like these seasons are great. Tennant was clearly so in love with the role. And he was such a joy to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that I think, we might get into at a later date when we're coming to the end of all this wrap up stuff. But I think I do think like it's a fundamentally different question when you talk about who's your favorite performer in the role of the Doctor and who to you encapsulates what the Doctor is. Or like what are your favorite things about the Doctor? And I do think those are kind of two different questions, and I've started to kind of recognize that, because like, don't get me wrong, Tennant is as 10 is my second favorite if he's not my favorite Doctor, but he might not be my favorite Doctor as I anticipated. He's certainly my favorite actor to play him, though. Part of that's the breadth of material he's given is just excellent, but it's also just his passion for it bleeds into you. He's special. Yeah. That's all.
Xander, what about you?
So Capaldi's my favorite.
Sure.
We've been over this.
I think that's true for me too. I'm coming to realize.
But I don't think there is really a way to say that there's okay. In no small part did the 10th Doctor like not affect literally everything.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Tennant's run, no matter who your favorite Doctor is in like New Who, just has such a like powerful effect on, I think, pretty much everyone else that like takes up the mantle. I mean, there's a reason that everyone's kind of like constantly compared to him and not just the previous iteration. You know, like he set kind of, I think, what a lot of people consider that gold standard for like what Doctor Who should be in general. I think there's obviously a little bit of like nostalgia that goes with that. A little bit of like, that was really when Doctor Who was like taking off and, you know, becoming more and more relevant to pop culture. Like there's a lot of things that like stacked up on top of Tennant's run that are just inextricably just part of that series of Doctor Who. Like, you can't honestly separate and pick all those elements out because all those elements contributed to that run. And I don't think there's been another one that like is able to have that like very special mix of like things falling into place so right.
Yeah.
To create that, you know, and it obviously helps that, you know, David Tennant's a great actor. And you know, David's got to showrun some great stuff. They had some amazing episodes with like super talented writers. Like they were knocking it out of the park very consistently. So it's just one of those things where it's like, now I can look back and be like, sure, it might not be my favorite Doctor, but you can't look back at that season and be like, yeah, I just think he's overrated. Oh, no, he's not that special. It's just like everyone likes him, and it's just because like he was at the start. It's everybody's new. No, shut up. You're wrong. It's good. It's objectively good, and you know, no small part of Doctor Who being around today.
Yeah.
All right, let's regenerate to the 11th Doctor. Matt Smith came in.
That's
at
it.
season 5. My whole room explodes.
Yeah.
Season 5 brought in Matt Smith, Stephen Moffat, clean slate, new companions, Amy, Karen Gillan, as Amy Pond, Amelia Pond. I will say this right up front. Season 5 is my least favorite season of New Who.
Wow, even against Whittaker stuff?
Shit. Season 5, maybe bottom 3.
I was like,
1000% forgot.
I don't know. Like, I hate to say, I really should say Chibnall because it's so not her fault.
No, it's not.
I don't want it to be associated to her. Yeah. I think I'm different from you. I think I like season 5 more than I like season 6. As far as like Matt Smith stuff is. I definitely enjoy season 7. But I think season 6 might be, in a very general overall sense, it might be near the bottom. I don't know. That's tough to say. But I like season 5. I'll put it this way. I was thinking a lot about this recently. And obviously, we're talking about Doctor Who. I think Matt Smith captures something that even Tennant's Doctor, and this isn't a criticism on Tennant's performance. It's just not what I think is I think this is something Moffat intended to do with Matt Smith and with the show, and it's something Matt Smith wanted to do also, which is that he is a Doctor who I feel like is very much not made for kids, but definitely more connectable with kids.
Right.
I don't think I think like kids could like and enjoy Doctor Who in Tennant's era, but I think Matt Smith and his run is more crafted to engage children, and I don't think any season captures that feeling more than season 5. Like I think there's a reason a lot of kids fell in love with Doctor Who at the beginning of Matt Smith's run.
Sure. What about you, Xander? What do you think about season 5?
I don't hate it.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I don't know. I don't think I have as strong of a like reaction towards that season as you do. I think I'm just a little more forgiving with this season. Is this season the one, his introductory season, or the season after?
This is his introductory season.
The introductory season. Okay, yeah. Yeah. I tend to be more forgiving with introductory seasons. In general. New showrunner, new doctor, new
This was new everything, which had not happened.
So it's like, it's hard because I'm like, yeah, it wasn't a great season, but it's like it's difficult for me to not be like try to give them a little bit of like space, mostly because I do think the show does vastly improve.
Yeah, there's a lot in this, like going through these episode titles. I think he's got a strong first episode. I think the 11th hour is a really strong episode.
I want to agree. I want to just focus on that too. Like, I think the 11th hour is one of the best first episodes for a new modern Doctor. Like, I think structure wise, I think Smith proving himself against like that kind of monolith that was Tennant at the time. He comes out swinging in this episode. I think very well. The 11th hour is one of the best in his run.
I think genuinely, if we look at just the first episodes of each new Doctor, I think the 11th hour is my favorite of all.
It's a really good one.
It's
because
the best.
Capaldi's first episode I don't like.
I don't either.
Rose is fine. Rose is a pretty good episode to get into it. And I'm not crazy about. I think it's called The Christmas Invasion, which is Tennant's first episode.
Yeah.
The 11th hour is the one where I'm just like, No, that's a really good episode, and it's a really good introductory episode for the Doctor.
And also, just because we can't forget Whittaker is also in this conversation, and her
Which
introductory
like
episode has a lot of bumps. Yeah, a lot of bumps.
Yeah,
her episode, her introductory episode is hurt by the fact that it's so much less about her because you're introducing 3 companions in a first episode, and that's really tough. But here, I think 11th Hour like was out to prove itself and kind of like soars very high in order to meet that bar.
Yeah. And you know what? Who else is in this episode? Olivia Colman.
Yes, true. Yeah.
What?
I mean, again, British actors. That'll happen.
And I just like the season overall, and we'll get into a lot of this with the Smith eras. All of Moffat's big ideas, his big season-long ideas, don't work for me. And I mean every single one. The smaller ones, the smaller stuff that he does, work for me. Just when he kind of there's just a lot of the stuff that he does that just gets big, and I'm not really here for it. So I don't really like the cracks in the wall or the Pandorica or all that sort of thing. There's an idea that he's playing with in this season that he goes into the next season.
I just want to clarify. You're talking all of Moffat's big ideas with Smith. Not
with Smith,
Capaldi.
specifically with Smith. Yes.
Right. Okay. I just want to comment on that because like I think there was very much also at this time, and you see it most in season 6, which is maybe one of the reasons why I rub up against it, at least in my memory, where you felt the BBC pushing the globalization phenomenon that was Doctor Who. That's why like season 6 takes place so heavily in America for a chunk of it and actually films there. Like they really wanted to push reaching the audience they knew was there in a global sense, and they wanted to cater to it. And we don't know because he's not as open about this stuff as Davies is about like making productions and building these seasons and things. But like, I'm just looking at like his full run as a showrunner and considering like the Capaldi stuff, which we won't get too deep into, but like, I do feel like there was a pressure to make Smith's run big. And I think that ends up pushing some of these big series ideas further than Moffat maybe necessarily would have taken them without that pressure. Sure. All in all, like, there are problems. I 100% agree. I think like some of Moffat's stuff gets like eye roll inducingly level, like up its own butt at times. But it's hard for me not to imagine that he was not allowed to make the same level of show that Davies was.
Yeah.
Just because of the popularity that they knew was there. I mean, this is when Doctor Who starts going to Comic-Con.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
This is the biggest it ever gets. Like people are you know, quoting it. It becomes the Tumblr darling, like all that stuff. It's right, this era, particularly because of a reaction to Tenet, but this is where the machine is feeding itself. And I do think there's an amount of the BBC, because we know the BBC gets its hands in things pretty deeply sometimes. I do think there's an amount of like the environment that Moffat had to work inside of pushes some of these stories to a place that I don't know they would have happened to go into organically, left to Moffat's own devices.
Sure. This is the era of the Super Hulock fandom.
I was just looking that up to see that it was in the right like time.
Yeah.
Because Moffat was also doing Sherlock, which really kicked off something. And then Supernatural for some reason lumped into that same fandom.
Because those were the big Tumblr things. That was everyone who was young and hot and on Tumblr and liked hot guys was jumping between those 3 things.
Yeah.
That's also a good point too. Like Moffat's juggling Sherlock with the BBC around the same time as well. And I think that does cause like split focus too.
Yeah.
That hurts Smith's run, because all of this just to say, like, I think to Brandon's point, like, and we'll talk about it next time, Capaldi's bigger ideas, I think, are much more thoughtful and well executed. And I think it's ultimately because he was left alone to just do them on his own, rather than what we kind of see here, which is like, I think he even tries to say this at one point in Smith's run directly, because the Doctor says, I got too big.
Yeah.
Too noisy. And I do think that's Moffat writing directly, like, this got too out of hand.
Xander?
So out of the introductory season, aside from the
Yeah.
11th hour, what episode is the least bad?
The what?
The least what?
The least bad, like the
least bad.
I have
It's Vincent and the Doctor, and it's not a competition.
1000%. It is Vincent and the Doctor. Vincent and the Doctor is one of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who. Period. Like throughout the entire run of the show, I think that episode is rather incredible. Let me get the writer name again, because he only wrote one episode of Doctor Who.
It's Johnny Campbell.
No, right? It's Richard.
Oh,
Johnny Campbell is the director.
Mhm.
Yeah. Richard Curtis.
Richard Curtis is the writer, and he wrote Love Actually and About Time. About Time, one of my favorite movies of all time.
Great movie.
And that's why Bill Nighy is in this movie, is in this episode, as the bow tie wearing curator of the art gallery. Truly an incredible look at how depression can affect an artist. And a wonderful tribute to Vincent Van Gogh, sorry. And Smith's strongest in this season as the Doctor. Truly one of my favorite episodes of Doctor Who ever.
Xander, I know your appreciation for Vincent Van Gogh. So was that a cue up because you wanted to focus on
100%.
Yeah, okay,
100%. I just wanted to get us talking on this.
Yeah,
1000%.
Oh God. Man, I will sometimes be like just watching clips of shows, and then like Doctor Who clips will pop up on those. And the section with the art gallery at the end is not just a tearjerker for the sake of being a tearjerker, but it's impactful because it's I think it's that thing that we all want. I think it's that thing that any creative strives for. And it's not so much fame, but just finding someone that has such a deep, pure appreciation for your work. You know, I think he was like emotional that all his paintings were there. I mean, like it shows as it's like swelling up, but he doesn't really break down until he hears that, like, you know, it's like, in my opinion, he's one of the greatest artists ever.
Yeah.
And that's what like hit that, like that validation, that like sense of just like what I have done does have value, because we go through the whole episode about him being like unable to sell a painting and like just kind of like bumming around, and it just like, oh, it's so great. I think the end with the small conversation that Amy and the Doctor have, where it's just like, yeah, but you know, so did we do it? Did we change, you know, the future? Did he actually like still kill himself? And it's like, yeah, it's about being able to like appreciate the good days even through all of the bad ones.
Yeah.
And there's so much in this episode that like speaks to just like a very genuine kind of like look at depression and suicide, and kind of like how people can be haunted and still have those days where they can take that and not have it be worse, but like create beauty.
Well, one of my favorite scenes is when the Doctor is like, okay, we'll be out of your hair after this. And he breaks down. He's like, you're just like all the others. You're going to leave me. And he starts yelling at them. And then like, was it a couple hours later? He's like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I have these moments, I have these episodes, but they pass, and look how beautiful this world is. And how could I stay sad like that all the time? And, you know, all that thing.
Yeah.
And like, you know, the Doctor has this great moment of like, we have to take the good stuff with the bad, but life is all about the good stuff, the little good things that you put all together. And I'm paraphrasing like hell, but like, you know, he's got this whole bit where where it's like, yeah, you did make a difference in Vincent's life, and just because he just because he did kill himself anyway, doesn't mean that what happened didn't matter. It mattered to him, and it because we see it in the painting for Amy,
right?
Because like it did matter, but it just, sometimes it's those voices, those feelings, they can't be beaten.
I think it in a lot of ways treats it with a kind of still like respect and kind of like, understanding, where it's like, look, this terrible thing did happen, but like we focus on everything else that he was, not just, the end of it. And I don't think that's something a lot of shows do right.
Mhm.
I really don't think that like depression or suicide or anything is handled well in a lot of media.
Me too.
And this just kind of like really sort of broke that mold in what I had been seeing, because I mean, for every, one episode of this, we get 3 or 4 seasons of like stuff like 13 Reasons Why.
Yeah.
Which is like, if you're listening to this and you've heard of the show and you feel like, oh, I should watch it, don't. It's not worth your time. It's such a terrible handling of that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it does all the things that you guys are just saying. I'm in full agreement, and I think it's very much comes from a place of like, this is like something where people who appreciate Vincent today wish this is a gift that could have been given to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not that it would have changed everything, but it would have changed, some things, and how lovely that would be if we could, which is very touching and very special, because Vincent is such a high profile tragic artist. Like he's pretty much the go-to of like not appreciated in his time kind of thing. And I think that's very lovely, and like, I'm grateful that it had never been touched in Doctor Who before, so that this could happen.
Me too.
Because I think it's quite lovely. It's hard to, and like it feels like it's gotten like, overused isn't the word, but like overexposed, I guess, for so many things. Like it's on blankets and pillowcases and everything now, but like in his style interpretation of the TARDIS exploding is gorgeous.
Sure. Even at the end of the episode, when he's describing how the sky looks to him and how he wishes people could see the world as he does, and we start seeing, we begin to see the sky as he sees it, and it's this beautiful kind of moment of seeing the sky in the Van Gogh style. Xander, did you ever see Loving Vincent?
I did.
We saw it together in theaters. This is why I was like, I know Xander's queuing this up.
Yeah, no,
it's a great movie.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I adore Vincent and the Doctor. Like it's just such a wonderful episode. It's unlike any Doctor Who episode because it's Richard Curtis writing it. Like I'm kind of glad he never wrote another episode, because as we'll talk about it, Neil Gaiman writes a really great episode, but his second episode, not so great. But having this like beautiful Richard Curtis written a love letter to Vincent van Gogh, and this idea of the way it handles depression and everything like that, I'm so grateful to have it. I'm so grateful it exists. I am grateful this season exists so we have this episode.
Right. Yeah. And when you do have kind of those like overarching plot lines you don't care about as much, like the Pandorica.
I don't care about the Pandorica at all.
It's nice to have these little, these little things, these little like, the Pandorica was the one where Rory becomes the Centurion, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That part I liked. I like Rory.
Yeah.
I like Rory.
I was going to say, I think this is true of a lot of the Moffat stuff. I really like the buildups. It's the conclusions that get me. Like everything building up to what's going to happen to the TARDIS, the Pandorica is opening, blah 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 blah. I liked all that, all the build up. There's a crack in your wall. It all works for me. It's just I think Moffat's storytelling is better when it's more concise. And I think when he's forced to draw out his mysteries, like, you know, like when we've had Silence in the Library and that stuff, right? That 2-parter episode, that's the right length for Moffat's storytelling. 1 to 2 episodes. But like when he has to draw his mysteries out over a season, either his clues get too weird, or they don't feel like they thematically fit, or he starts having to hit you over the head with them. And I think that hurts what he's good at as a storyteller, because I think this was one of the things that was jarring for all of us, is because like Moffat working under Davies as showrunner does some of the best episodes of Doctor Who there are. Silence in the Library, Blink. These are incredible episodes. He invents the Weeping Angels. Like he invents cool creatures. I will say this, like, you know, we'll get to the Silence in a moment. I think the Silence is exceptionally cool. It's just, you know, I just don't think he's designed for long form storytelling like that. Not in this way. Not in this way. And I do think like he only starts to refine it in the last seasons of Capaldi.
Yeah, there's more in the season that I do want to touch on, because I really hate his 2-parter Angel episode, which are what are they called? The Time of the Angels and Flesh and Stone. I really don't like those 2 episodes. I think
go off, King. I don't agree, but go off.
The whole angel lore thing that he creates, like an image of an angel becomes an angel. Oh, but if you stare at an angel too long, that angel is inside you. And I'm like, you're doing a lot. And like but there's like stuff in the episode that I kind of like, which is I like the guy who plays the father. He's Batman and Titans, and he's in Game of Thrones, and I like that actor quite a bit. I forgot his name. But and like the whole idea of like, when they're like, oh yeah, all these aliens had 2 heads, then why do the statues have 1 head? It's because they're angels. That's pretty cool, but like, it just as a 2-part episode, it just doesn't work for me, like, at all. There's just nothing about it. I was trying to rewatch it, and I was like, I don't care.
Ian Glenn,
Ian Glenn, thank you.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, is that the first episode we get with River Song?
Is that the first episode of River Song?
Sparkz is no longer with us.
Oh, Sparkz is frozen again?
Yeah.
The internet and
he's being observed.
Sparkz, is this the first episode of River Song? Yes, I believe so, in the Matt Smith era.
In the Matt Smith era, yes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously.
And
yes.
Yeah.
I like it, but I feel no need to like get into it or defend it.
Sure. There's other things that like we also are reintroduced to the Silurians in this season, which are a classic Doctor Who villain. Sparkz, do you like this episode too?
I do like this 2-parter, and I think it's only worth noting that it's Chris Chibnall who writes it. And this is like one of the times where I like what Chibnall's doing.
Interesting.
We'll get into it later.
And Rory, though, I think is a good. I think Rory is a good companion, but the first 2 seasons with Amy don't work for me. As I don't think she worked. She never really quite worked for me as a companion. Matt Smith.
To me, Amy only works as a companion with Rory.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, but also I get really mad at Amy because she's so clearly in love with the Doctor until season 7. And not in love with Rory, and so like that really bothers me because there's so much like lustful chemistry with Amy and the Doctor.
I want to counter that idea a little bit because I agree to an extent. I also only really like Amy and Rory as a pair. I don't like when Amy seems to be pining for the the Doctor, and that's something that's so heavily focused on in season 5 is a thing that dings it for me.
Mhm.
I think season 6, Amy is no longer pining for the Doctor. I don't think. That's not my read on her in that season. But I think the idea of it is still hanging over the story. Whether that's because the question is being asked by others or it's just remaining unanswered until season 7. It feels like that is also part of that push from the, like, again, a little bit of that BBC, the popularity of Tumblr. Like, well, we can't 100% say that love triangle doesn't exist, so just don't get too deep into it. But I feel like Moffat's really trying to write her that season as, and like the other writers too, I feel like as a showrunner, he's trying to guide that character away from that in season 6 already. I don't think that's as baked in as it is in season 5, but I also think it's not clarified to leave that ambiguity.
See, the way I always read it was kind of like he found it to. You're right. He's not as open as a showrunner, but the way it reads to me is that he just kind of finds it funny that Amy would be attracted to the Doctor and kind of keeps that going. But your read could also be absolutely right. This idea that the BBC wanted to keep it going and that he was trying to push it away from it.
I think there is something that is very accurate as a read on Davies and Moffat as showrunners, and I think it's very much that Davies always wants to be a companion to the Doctor. Like, that's, as a person and a showrunner, that's what he's writing. That's what he's creating. He's most interested in, like, as a kid, watching Doctor Who, wanted to be the companion to the Doctor. And Moffat, as a kid, wanted to be the Doctor.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, I think you get that very clearly from the way that one of the reasons why the Matt Smith era rubs me the wrong way often is because of this idea of this lonely god in a big blue box. This kind of like oncoming storm that will he treats the Doctor very godlike as far as the 11th Doctor goes. Whereas I don't think he does that with the 12th Doctor. I think the 12th Doctor kind of goes more back to like this tourist, this right. Traveling tourist idea, which I prefer to have the Doctor in.
However much agency he might have in that or not, it does feel like that's all just like, again, a snake eating its own tail reaction kind of thing to the oncoming storm stuff of David Tennant's era being built up. It's like, okay, go bigger with that. This is the idea at the time. Like, Doctor Who became so much more popular than it ever been in its entire life. And it's like, okay, yeah, so go bigger with it, go crazy. I will spotlight one other episode in Series 5 I quite like, which is Victory of the Daleks, because I really like the Churchill stuff. I just do.
Sure. Yeah. No. It's fun. The Churchill stuff is fun.
I think that's a rather lovely side episode inside of the Matt Smith era, but I would certainly like to move on to.
No, I also want to highlight the Lodger, which I also think is a pretty fun episode.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But yeah, let's move on.
So before we get into season 6, there is a Christmas special, and I will only highlight it because for me personally, it is my favorite Christmas special.
It is mine too.
I quite like a lot of them. This is the only one I will put on pretty much every Christmas. Yeah. Because for me, it is functionally its own Christmas film. And that is Christmas Carol with Michael Gambon. And I adore this story. I think it is such a cool interpretation of the Christmas Carol storytelling. I really love the use of, I'm going to find her name, but the Abigail, Catherine Jenkins, who has this very beautiful voice, singing her way through the, like, there's a shark that swims through the sky. This is one of my favorite things Michael Gambon ever does in his career. This is, I think, one of the best ways Moffat ever writes Smith's Doctor. Outside of the 11th Hour, I would argue this is my favorite way that he writes Smith's Doctor. I think you get the right amount of the emotionality and the fun that he brings to the 11th Doctor, both from Smith's performance, but also from what Moffat's writing. I adore this Christmas special. I think it's exceptional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
no, I
so
wouldn't,
good.
I 100% agree. Christmas Story is one of my favorite books of all time. I love most renditions of it in film, and I think this is Moffat on top form, just delivering what exactly what he wanted to do, which is what we talked about a lot when we were kids about this. Like, I wanted Christmas to be a part of the special, not just kind of a background thing. So it's very much a Christmas story set within Doctor Who, and it. I think he absolutely nails it. I'm 100% in agreement with Sparkz.
Yeah, I think it has one of my favorite things about what the Doctor does with time, which is when Michael Gambon's character is looking in the screen of his younger self in a video, and the Doctor shows up after he had just been there, and the Doctor's like, it's okay, you're gonna catch up, and he's like, but that didn't happen, and then he turns dramatically and he's like, but it did. It's like the memories are forming in his head, and I love that. I love that kind of like rewriting this man's life storytelling, and that you're seeing it at both sides through it. I think is so clever and fun. I adore Christmas Carol. It's one of my favorite things in Doctor Who.
Yeah, I do too.
I didn't care for it.
6.
Are you just like, are you messing with us,
Carol?
or are you being sincere?
No, I'm messing with you.
God damn. Season 6 is there's more I like in season 6 than there is in season 5.
So this is, I agree with you. I should agree with you more. I hate season 6. Hate's a strong word. I don't mean that, but like, I dislike so much of season 6 because of the river song of it all.
Yeah.
Pretty much
again, that
everything.
Goes back to like, for me, like the big ideas don't work for me.
Yes, and this is the I think the biggest idea fumble for me, because and to me, I guess I find it the most egregious because like it doesn't just kneecap this season, it kneecaps a bunch of storytelling before and after this season of Doctor Who. And it's this handling of, first off, it's that we find out, River's the daughter of Amy and Rory, which I actually had no problem with. That's not the part that gets me personally. I rather like the Melody Pond reveal to be River Song. I thought that was rather clever.
Did you know, and the person who gives her that like the Melody Pond thing, I don't know if you went back to rewatch it, but it's Lieutenant Noonien Singh from Strange New Worlds.
No, I did not know that.
I haven't even noticed it.
No, I haven't gone back since I watched Strange New World. So this is probably like the era of Doctor Who I'm least likely to ever revisit.
Sure.
Yeah. I really personally don't like the River Song stuff here because I never believe in the way that he writes it here and the way that he writes all of Smith. So just focusing on the Smith era, that Smith's Doctor ever actually loves River, which it feels like the story on its surface level wants to tell me is true, but like I never believe it. It always feels like a gimmick to get out of something. I think Alexander Kingston, that's her name, right? I got that right.
Alex Kingston.
Alex Kingston,
I believe is her name.
I think she's really great as River. I think she's a great actress, but I think it was such a misstep to show us that she not only could she regenerate, but we also saw all of the one regeneration that happens before she becomes River Song, who we know where she dies. So like, or like the River Song Kingston that we know. And so like you had all this opportunity to do all this storytelling in the future with the Doctor and this woman who he's going to love. I'm like, even if you don't nail it here, it's okay because you have this wealth of opportunity with different actors to get the chemistry to do all these things. And Moffat just like nips that in the bud and says no. She very quickly becomes Alex Kingston, and like that means her timeline is limited. I thought that was so short-sighted and disappointing.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
I think
Xander?
this falls into kind of what we were discussing earlier, which is that Moffat's long arc things just don't land as well. I like the opening of this season.
Yeah.
I like the silence. I think the whole thing with the impossible astronaut was pretty cool.
I like the silence. I don't like the 2 episodes though.
That's fair. I enjoyed it. I like the 2
I like them.
episodes.
I like them as setup. I like them less when I know the answers to the questions.
Right? Yeah,
That might be what's happening.
This is the thing. Is like as those 2 episodes, just the information you have in them as setup of a mystery. I quite like them.
You're right. You know what? You're right. You're right, because like there's the whole thing of, real quickly, Xander, just want to say, like, there's the whole thing of like, we meet the doctor, we see him die, and then he comes back and he's like, wait, oh, this is a past version of the doctor. So then what did we just see? So like that's kind of interesting. Anyway, you were saying, Xander.
Yeah, no. And again, that's kind of where I'm coming from with this, is that like as a season opener, I really enjoy it. I think it's a really fun setup to what, you hope is a compelling mystery. It doesn't land, but it's a strong start. I think the doctor's wife, this Series 6 I really enjoy as well.
The doctor's wife, the Neil Gaiman episode. Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I get so sad when I think about the fact that this brilliant episode about the TARDIS embodying a body and interacting with the Doctor is embedded in this awful season. Because I think this is truly one of the greatest episodes.
Look, it's the same thing as Vincent and the Doctor.
No, I don't think that season's as rife with problems as this one. Personally, I don't.
No, that's fair.
I think probably Sparkz, I might have, because I went back and rewatched a lot of these episodes. Like the Curse of the Black Spot, I think is a lot of fun. I think that the closing time's fun, but thinking about what the overarching story is about, what this overarching story of River Song.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I don't like the Pandorica. I don't think that's a good story. I think it's weird and whatever and fine. But I think the Pandorica is fine. But thinking back on it, I think River Song is bad. So I think I might have misspoke in saying that season 5 was my least favorite, and perhaps I was with you, Sparkz, and season 6 is my least favorite.
Well, here's my other thing about it, is that like the Pandorica stuff really takes up the meat of 2 episodes in season 5. Like there's setup stuff, but like it's the 2 episodes at the end of the season.
Yeah.
This story around River Song and like where they're going with this whole death mystery, that's like 5 to 6 episodes of this season. It's almost half of this season is steeped in this. And like, so the fact that like, and I like the opening. Like if I'm thinking about it just as the opening, I remember being into it. I was excited. It was essentially setting up a murder mystery. Like, how are we going to get the Doctor out of this one? Because the Doctor died, but who killed the Doctor? That kind of thing. That was super exciting. But when you know the answers to the questions, then all of those episodes fall flat on their face. And like, that's about half the season that falls flat on its face, which is just so hard. And like, this truly is like, I think the worst of what Moffat ends up doing as showrunner is shortchanging his own creation of River Song, who I think is a genius character to have created and a wonderful performance to have offered into the world of Doctor Who. We were so excited when she showed up and she knew the Doctor and Tennant had no clue who she was. Like, we thought that, oh my God, this is wild. What could this mean? All these things. And like, you figure out that she has to be very important to him, ultimately learning that she has to be his wife. And I think all that's lovely, but I don't believe the chemistry between Smith and Kingston. It never works for me. Then, I don't think it's written in a way for Smith to seem like he's in love with her. That never plays. I believe she loves him because of how it's written, but I never believe that the Doctor loves her. And I do think that this is one of those things where, like, I think Moffat comes full circle on this later, and I won't get too deep into it until we really talk about that episode. But I do look at Capaldi's last episode with River as an apology for this, because I do think he writes River talking about the Doctor in a way that I think Moffat recognizes is what he was writing when he was doing these episodes, which is a Doctor who's not capable of loving River because he's like this other kind of being. And I think that's who Moffat's writing here, is like a being who can't love River.
The Capaldi episode does so much heavy lifting for me in their relationship. So much heavy lifting. The thing here is that we're coming off of a season that was flirting very strong with the idea of this like love triangle.
Yes, that's such a good
point. And now we're going into, here's River's Song, who knows his name, is important to him, has all this stuff from like this setup that we had so much earlier in 10th's. I mean, it's this kind of like, it's supposed to be this like very important character in his life, but she comes in at a time where the plot and story isn't really allowing another love interest into it. And it's like, I think what you said earlier has a lot of meaning here, in that they're really pushing the popularity of Doctor Who into this kind of like space, and they're trying to bring in this character that like comes from a different era of Doctor Who. And is trying to bring into this like a really actual meaningful like relationship that's just not where, as a show, as far as like its production is concerned, cares for it.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because so much of it is centered around her, because it's supposed to be this big like thing, and the show wants you to feel like it's a big thing, but it falls flat because it's coming in at a time where none of the characters seem invested in her.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of fun writing around the two of them that is compelling, because Smith is, the way Matt Smith just is the Doctor, is fun to kind of, it's just constantly that kind of dialogue that he's constantly given. But when it comes to I'll push a little bit back on Sparks's thing of like the story, like the River Song thing takes about 5 episodes. You're right, River is probably about 5 episodes, but it's every episode. Every episode of this season is building to the wedding of River Song. Every episode is introducing an element of that will be important, and that's really rough when you're watching, because like I went back to watch like the Curse of the Black Spot, which is a fun episode. It's just a fun pirate episode of Doctor Who, and then Madame Kavarian opens up a thing and it's like, yes, Amy is sleeping comfortably, and like you're like, oh right, this plot line is happening. I forgot about that for a moment. And it kind of like constantly wants to remind you, hey, remember, this is the plot of the season.
Now that's not normally an issue in episodes like that, because like we could go back to season 4 of 10th's Run, and you've got Rose showing up on video screens trying to talk to the Doctor before she gets there, and I'm like, we love that, but that's because we love how that ends. And so like I hear your point when I said like it's 5 episodes. I mean, it's like 5 episodes are actually like fully about it.
Yeah,
which is too many. It's too many.
It's a really weird. I'm looking at this thing, and I'm just like, the whole ending, the whole episode, the wedding of River Song is a flat miss for me. When it's just like this. There's one scene I really like in it though that I do want to highlight before I talk about how shit it is. Which is when Churchill and the Doctor are talking. The Doctor's telling Churchill what's going on, and they're like, and the next scene they're like in a new place and the thing, and the Doctor's like, why are we in here? And Churchill's like, oh, why do I have a revolver? and like the doctor looks at his arm and he's got a tick on his arm, and he's like, oh, maybe I'll keep telling the story. And so like as we keep getting back, like something has changed in the present that they're forgetting because they're seeing the silence.
Right.
And it's a great, what I really like is like, oh, there's only 4 silence. Look at the other arm covered in ticks, and like, oh shit.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good scene, but ultimately the story doesn't, it goes back to this thing of Sparkz that you're talking about with like Moffat's storytelling going up its own ass, where it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It just flat doesn't work. Like there's not really much more I can say other than, for me, the whole episode doesn't work, and therefore the whole storyline with River doesn't work at all.
Yes, I agree. Like it's very much in a place where I would still always feel like the decision to introduce regenerations for River Song and then immediately get rid of them was stupid. But if I just believed the love story blooming, I would think the season worked. I just never do. It never gets there. And it's not on the actors. I don't blame either of them. It's not written in a way for me to believe it at this point in time. I just don't. And I think Xander brought up a good point that like so quickly, and as we said earlier, like this season isn't clarifying that Amy doesn't have feelings for the Doctor, but it's certainly not, like it's certainly like playing in the ambiguity of it and leaving that idea open, and then says no, he actually marries and ends up with her daughter, and it's like, oh, okay,
how very Twilight of them.
I was literally just thinking the same thing.
This is also around the time, because there are a couple of episodes, including the Doctor's wife, that I do want to spotlight just a little bit of conversation about. But one thing that I do want to bring up is this is where Moffat starts doing something I really don't like him doing with the Doctor. And like for some it's a small thing, but I think it's quite a large thing in story context for Doctor Who that none of the other showrunners ever step on. And even Moffat himself, I think, tries to correct away from it. Not like undoing it, but like be better about it in the future. Which is that he makes the Doctor between episodes the 11 of this season, the God Complex, and 12 Closing Time, almost 200 years pass of the Doctor being alone.
Yes.
And I can't. It goes so deeply against everything we know about the Doctor that like he can't do that for that long. And like I can accept an amount of years, but 200 was massive. And it's not the only time. This is just like one of the most egregious ones, but it's not the only time that like a large time.
It happens a lot.
Is referenced in Moffat's run, especially with Smith, of a lot of time passing that we're not seeing just to make him older.
I joke about this quite a lot, but it's true. Like, for a little bit into like 14th Doctor, just tiny bit. There's all this talk about how it's been 15 years since Donna saw the Doctor. It's been over 1,000 years since the Doctor saw Donna. And that's because of this era of Moffat just constantly doing the same between episodes, having more and more time.
Right. But even if it didn't do that amount of years, like a lot of stuff would have happened between then and there. And that should be plenty to feed us. Even if like there's small gaps of time, like the Doctor does, like, the Doctor did a couple years there after Amy and Rory are gone. And like, oh, sure.
Yeah, I agree with you a lot. Sorry, I was trying to make sure that there was an episode in this season that I was.
No, it's okay. I think this is something. Man, there's such good stuff in Capaldi's. There's a better episode of Capaldi where he goes through a lot of time, but not really. But the point is, but the point I want to make is like, even though he didn't actually go through that amount of time, I sense the weight of time having passed on the actor. And that's not something that's happening. And I don't want to blame Smith because I don't think it's in the writing. Like, it's a throwaway line that it's been 200 years. It's not actually something that's changed him as a character. I also think, much to Xander's point earlier, this feels too soon to be doing I'm trying to run away from my death story just after we did stuff with Tennant. It wasn't that long ago.
We'll get into it with the next season, but holy shit. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not
Well,
into this.
and I think the next season and some of the Day of the Doctor, Time of the Doctor stuff would have worked better without that stuff being here, right?
Sure, maybe.
Like, I think it's going back to that well way too quickly, and sequentially. Like, I think if we didn't do that here, then when we get to the next episode, or the next season stuff, like, I don't think it would be as egregious feeling.
So, to jump a little bit into some of the other episodes, I do want to really quickly touch on A Good Man Goes to War.
Me too.
Sure.
So I like how Spark's thing is like the amount of years that pass is his kind of like, I don't vibe with this. I don't either. I hadn't even thought about it. I was like, yeah, I hated when that happened.
Yeah.
This here is a kind of what becomes a core element of the Doctor's character this run. And I don't like it. I never liked it. The whole like, and I think it to me changes my perspective a little bit on even the first episode, and that sucks because I loved the first episode, and now it's like feeding all these things backwards towards it, where it's like, look, he says his name and an entire alien race runs away.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Pandorica is about him saying, you know who I am, come at me, who wants to go first? And they all run away.
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, later on you do get no, I became too big, I'm too loud, I'm too, it's like, yeah, and that's great that they were able to backpedal on that. But this episode, more than even those other two, cements it so hard for me that it's like Matt Smith's entire character isn't like the character that he is throughout the run. It cements that it's like this other side of him, this like warmongering kind of like, guy that is difficult for me to accept in the arc of the Doctor, because he goes through, it feels like he went through all this. You get the War Doctor, you get, the Ninth, who's dealing with like having just lost his race. You deal with, 10, who's really angry at all of it, at all the things he's done, and all the pain, and all at war in general, and then you get 11, who seems to relish in it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
yeah,
but only half the time.
But only half the time.
Yeah. So this goes back to what I was talking about. Like, I don't like how Moffat writes the Doctor specifically as like this god. There's a lot of like god complex happening with the way Moffat writes the Doctor. Not necessarily it's informing the Doctor's character, but just how Moffat sees the Doctor in this era specifically. Because like I said, I don't think this happens in the next era. When he's looking at like in A Good Man Goes to War, everyone, sorry, not just in A Good Man Goes to War, but like just everyone loves the Doctor. Everyone is in love with the Doctor. Not everyone loves the Doctor. Everyone is in love with the Doctor. How could they not be? Because he's the Doctor. He's the most incredible man in the world. He's this god. And I don't like that. I rub up against that so hard. There's an element of like, is this bouncing off of the Time Lord Victorious stuff? Is this Moffat taking this? But it's not explicitly handled in that way, because again, it's not informing the Doctor as a character. It's informing how the audience sees the Doctor more than anything.
Well, and going back to the time thing and why that bothers me is looking directly at Waters of Mars. There's an implication of what kind of person he'll be if he's alone for that long.
Yes.
And we get an episode in the season that's like, yeah, I just did 200 years. No big. And like, there's so deeply a through line of like this sense that the Doctor should never go that long on their own.
Yeah.
And a lot of what happens here flies right in the face of it. And it is specifically because it doesn't want to be in conversation like with the exact elements we were talking about there with Time Lord Victorious or
Yeah.
or Waters of Mars or this idea of becoming warmongering because of it, because it doesn't want to tell that story all the way.
Mm-hmm.
It leaves it less interesting. It's not giving us a thing that it's like kind of flirting with it. And that's what I mean is like, one of the worst things about it is that Matt Smith is only like this half of the time. And the other half of the time, he's the Doctor and Vincent and the Doctor and Christmas Carol. And that's the Matt Smith Doctor I love. I love Matt Smith.
And I mean, I think that's the Doctor most people remember.
Yeah.
You know, the thing here that, you know, I think gets me the most, and look, don't get me wrong, there are people on YouTube, there are people on TikTok that have gone into depth about kind of like the overarching arc of the Doctor, as far as like his attitudes towards, you know, anger and loss and everything. And it's like, yeah, and that's great, you know, and it's definitely an interpretation, but the whole thing with him like this just feels so it treats it. I would be more okay with it, like Sparkz said, if it treated it as an extension of the Waters of Mars, as the Time Lord Victorious. It was really a sort of like through line of him getting too in his head about how great he is. And instead, it feels like it's not even treating it as a bad thing. It's treating it as like, look at me, I'm so cool.
Yeah.
There's this thing I can do. It's very, you know, it's the Mary Sue of it all, you know? It never lands because it feels like it's not coming from a place of, wow, this is really dark. And it's, you know, he has to grapple with like his ideas changing about like war and no, it's just, yeah, I'm cool. I can just tell y'all to like back off because I'll kill you. I'll kill your entire race. It's like, what? That's so like dark and just thrown out. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm the Doctor. It's like, what do you mean?
Right. It's kind of like the Hulk, right? Like, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry. It's like, no, I want to see you be angry, actually, because this is the comic. This is how fun this comic would be, because the comic isn't interesting if Bruce Banner just doesn't get angry. I do want to mention about A Good Man Goes to War. It introduces Madame Vastra, Jenny, and Strax, and I love those characters.
Great characters. Love those three. I love those three so much.
Yeah, I'm so happy they were introduced in this season. I adore them. I'm glad they keep coming back.
Yeah, but this I think above all, even above the like love triangle, above the extra time, I think this is to me what knocks down 11th's run as like one I want to really like go back to and one I really want to like rank higher.
Yeah. Let's move into season 7 then, if that's okay with everyone else.
I know you wanted to touch on the
Doctor's just wife. Real quick.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, we should touch on the Doctor's wife.
Yeah, the Doctor's wife is incredible. TARDIS realized as a character very, very cool. Couldn't be any cooler. Like one of the greats, one of the great episodes. I also personally really like The Girl Who Waited, where Amy gets the older version of herself that she has to deal with. I thought that was quite a good time story inside of Doctor Who. I rather liked that one and its interrogation of like the reversal of what Amy's been created into, like the girl who waited for the Doctor and like the girl who waited for the Doctor again. And I feel like that is very directly Amy getting to reclaim agency.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. The Doctor's wife, I should also mention that like it was the first time that we got to see 10th's TARDIS console, which led me to wonder, like, do they just keep that? I thought they destroyed that. Let's just keep it in the storage somewhere.
Yeah, it's just in a different room.
Yeah,
they're all in different rooms.
That was interesting. Where like and the imagery of that I think got out in the trailer and everyone was like, "What does that mean?"
Yeah, It's a really good episode, though. Neil Gaiman wrote a really solid episode, and I wish I could say that about his next episode, but I don't much care for it myself.
I think it's so funny because I really like the other episode too.
Really? I didn't get a chance to rewatch it, so I just have my memory of the first time I saw it, right? Which is where I'm coming from. So maybe on a rewatch, I like it more.
This is where the doctor gets the like cyber thing on his head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I quite like that one. That's where when he was cast in the Terminator film, I was like, I see the vision.
That's funny.
No, I rather like Nightmare in Silver personally.
But I should rewatch it.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it.
Part of it is where I feel Smith gets to play with that kind of the stuff we were alluding to, the Dark Sister.
God, the second you start talking about the Cybermen.
Real quick, just Matt Smith gets to play with his more sinister sides he can bring to the Doctor in a way that feels like it belongs in a story for once.
Yes, and it's good, and I like when he does like it does build depth to the character. You know, it just.
I think season 7 is Smith's strongest season. There's a lot of episodes I quite like. The Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe, I think is Moffat trying too hard to recapture what worked with the Christmas Carol. So not crazy about that one myself.
Sure,
but I quite like Asylum of the Daleks. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is fun. The Power of 3. I thought Power of 3 was the only Chibnall one this season.
No, Dinosaurs on a. Am I right? Yeah, Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is Chibnall. Yep,
Chris Chibnall. Yeah, that's a fun one. That we're introduced to Rory's dad in that episode, which is played by.
Oh yeah, God,
Mark
I
Williams.
love him. Oh, he's so good.
Yeah, The Power of 3 is a personal favorite of mine because it introduces Kate Stewart, who I really love.
Yeah, that's quite good too.
That's also a Chibnall episode.
Moffat oversees some really great stuff in his time as showrunner. There are some solid choices that are made.
But I really don't like The Angels Take Manhattan.
That's okay. See, this is the Angels episode where I agree. I don't care for that one either. I like the only thing I like about it is the
oh no, Sparkz. I hate to tell you this, buddy, but once again, they have struck.
Yeah.
Don't hit
the Angels are getting me.
The Angels. What was it about you? The thing that you liked about it? You were talking about something that you liked about the episode.
I just like the way that they take out Amy and Rory. I think that part of it is good.
See, I don't even care for that myself. This goes back to the idea of Moffat's kind of bigger ideas I don't really care for, and this I kind of lump into that category. I don't get it. I don't get why the Doctor's like, I can never see you again. Well, if they leave Manhattan, the Angels are all gone. The Angels, the Statue of Liberty is gone, I guess. But like the Angels are all gone, they can just leave Manhattan and the Doctor can pick them up like that at a different part of 1938. It doesn't make sense to me. And even on a show at Doctor Who that is often silly, it kind of breaks my brain. I don't much care for thematically. I think it works to have like Amy and Rory kind of live out their life in the past and be together forever. That's all fine. But like story wise, doesn't work for me at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the Snowman's good.
Snowman.
Yes.
Real
the
quick.
Beginning.
For one last thing for the Angels Take Manhattan.
Yeah.
There's definitely a little bit of a kind of like to it. You know, it does feel like this. Yeah, their story arcs are pretty much wrapped up by this point.
Mm-hmm.
As even before that, you see that they're already traveling less with the Doctor.
Yeah, that's what the Power of 3 is about.
You know, yeah, and it's like cool. I think there's, you know, this sort of like tragic end for all of his companions, at least in New Who. And the thing that got me about this one was that this end felt so like, oh, well, something's have to happen to him because there's no way he wouldn't just leave them unless something happened.
Yeah, this goes.
You
Well, this
know?
is also something that like the Doctor does on in the Moffat era. Both Doctors in the Moffat era,
Mhm.
they will go back. They'll like drop him off and go back, and that's never what the Doctor's never done that before. And I don't mind that as like you want to just tell a story about the Doctor just kind of constantly checking in with his friends and constantly traveling
Mhm.
with them. Sparkz?
To be fair, the Doctor does go back and see Martha in his season with Donna, and he would go back for Donna if Donna could remember him, I suspect.
Well, that's true. That's probably true. It's just that I and I don't mind, like I said, I don't mind it as a storytelling perspective, but it does kind of create this weird, like, how do we write Amy and Rory out of this?
Mhm.
Because, like, if he's going to just come back, they can't just leave. Something has to happen that he can't see. He just can't see them ever again. And I don't think, I think the answer isn't satisfactory. I don't think it works.
Yeah, no, me neither.
But it's, yeah, the whole episode's just kind of rough. I'm not crazy about it myself, but you know, I liked Amy and Rory this season, which which is kind of a shame because I had to say goodbye to them, but it is what it is.
Mhm.
Um, the Snowmen, which is the Christmas special, that there's two Christmas specials this season. This is the longest season of Doctor Who and New Who,
Mhm.
because it spans 2 years, 3 years actually, but if you count Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. Um, and the Asylum of the Daleks introduces us to Jenna Louise Coleman, but the Snowman introduces us to Clara Oswald,
Yeah.
or a version of her. Um, I really like the Snowman. Actually, I think it's a really solid episode.
I do
Yeah,
too.
no, I agree.
Richard E. Grant's in this one,
Yes, Richard E. Grant's in a chunk here. Yeah.
and Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen's the voice of the Great Intelligence.
Yes, I remember that now.
Oh,
Yeah, I quite like the back half of season 7.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wish I went back to see to watch more of it, because I do remember liking a lot of this.
I remember not liking Clara a lot at the start.
I liked Clara more at the start than I did at the end, and we'll get to that when we talk about Capaldi.
Right. Yeah. I liked her in the middle. I think that's the only place I liked her.
Yeah,
I always like Clara.
You told me she's your favorite companion.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think she's
Yeah.
the best companion, but I think she's my personal favorite.
That's cool. Like from the jump, you were like, "This is yes, I'm in love with you. You're great."
I really like Jenna Coleman. I really like
Yeah.
that what she brings to the table. I think Catherine Tate is lovely. And I think she is the best companion in a story term. But like same as the Doctor, like a Jenna Coleman's my favorite actor, I think, to play a companion.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I love what she's able to do with Clara. I think Clara gets better. I think Clara gets better writing, and I'm not going to give Moffat the credit of saying like he knew where he was going with the character the entire time. But I think her arc works really well, and I find it enjoyable because like there's rarely ever a time I go back and I find myself pissed off at her for like, I mean, like coming off the Amy and Rory stuff, like wanting to sleep with the Doctor, or feeling possessive about the Doctor, or all this kind of stuff. Like,
so to kind of finish up what I was saying, I didn't like her much at the start. That does change. Probably not by the middle, but I think I want to say by the end of just part 2 of this season. I think a lot of it has to do that I found myself enjoying their dynamic more than I was with Amy and Rory.
Sure.
I like Amy and Rory a lot. I like Rory a lot. It just, I think that it was too muddled with like all the all the stuff between them, all the like interconnected things that, that first season, it felt like it was a nice kind of like redo, like I think the changing companion really kind of like freshened up the end of his story.
Sure. I will say though, Clara falls into the same problem that I was just this isn't her fault, or the actor's fault or the writer's fault or anything. It's just the sense that the Doctor, again, it goes back to like everyone is in love with the Doctor and so is Clara. And like that was by that point I was already really sick of it. So I don't blame Clara necessarily for that storyline. I will say I unfairly projected a lot of disinterest onto her because of that, though.
Right. So that did get me. My opinion of her changes so much once Capaldi comes into the scene.
Yes.
Because that dynamic is no longer there.
I will say, and I think this is still true even in the Smith era, it's just the foundation of it. But I won't give Moffat full credit for the whole arc, I do think like Clara is a more honestly written and constructed companion for him. Because again, going back to that idea, like if Davies always wanted to be a companion and imbued that so much into his companions, this is the time where Moffat, as a person who I think always wanted to be the Doctor, imbued that into a companion. And while I will say like that's a flaw of her character, I do think that that's a more honest storytelling perspective that Moffat's able to bring to it because that is Moffat's perspective.
Right. A companion that wants to be the Doctor themselves.
That's a good point. We get more of that during Capaldi's run than we do here, though.
Oh, of course, because she's in 2 whole seasons there, and she's only in like 6 or 7 episodes here.
Yeah.
Plus 2 specials. But again, like as I said, I think that foundation starts here. Like it's not a romantic fascination with the Doctor. It's a fascination with what the Doctor can do and all the things that he can be, and learning that she, from the jump, is also unique and special. And can be many things, right? Because this is one of my favorite episodes in the season, which is the Rings of Akaten, where they are singing. Huh?
No, I was just agreeing now that I remember the episode.
Oh, got you. Sorry, I thought you wanted to jump in. The whole bit of him, the old god they're trying to keep asleep with the singing, and it has one of my favorite speeches from Smith where he's throwing everything, he's all his hurt and his pain at it, and then the lovely bit about what he learns about Clara and about the leaf and its connection to her parents, that chance encounter because of the leaf and how he ties that to her. I thought that was all. I think that's all very sweet. That episode as a foundation for who Clara is works for me personally.
Sure.
I have a soft spot for that episode.
There's 2 things I want to bring up real quickly. In regards to not necessarily about Clara. I'm gonna step away from Clara for a moment. And say that there's a comic book that I really love, which is called the Doctor and the Nurse, which is a comic book episode, which is a comic book that I always wanted to do as an episode, which is just the Doctor and Rory, no Amy. And I'm like, that's a story I would have loved to have seen. I loved Rory. I think Rory was great. But the Great Intelligence was really interesting because during Moffat's tenure, we see a lot of classic Who villains start to pop up more. The Silurians in the last season, no, 2 seasons ago. Sorry. In this season, we get the Ice Warriors. An Ice Warrior comes back, and the Great Intelligence is a second Doctor villain. The Snowman operates as a prequel to a second Doctor story. And when he comes back, and I find that so fascinating. We talked about it in the first episode we did, where we talked about Davies and how differently, there's no right or wrong way to do it, I don't believe, how differently each showrunner has used classic Who villains, and what in various ways. How we felt that Davies was very much like, I want to stay away as much as I can from classic Who villains, and where Moffat was like, I want to embrace them and kind of bring them into the modern day and still make them be like, these things are still scary,
Right.
which I find interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think in a broad way, like I think Moffat's quite successful at that.
I do too. Especially there's a Capaldi Ice Warrior episode, which I love.
Me too.
I can't wait to get to. I like this season quite a lot, but I hate the ending. I don't like the name of the Doctor and the time of the Doctor. Specifically, again, that goes back to the big ideas that Moffat plays with don't work for me. And the whole idea of Trenzalore 1000% doesn't work for me. It's kind of like the culmination of everything he was doing with Smith, and it just falls flat for me. It just doesn't work for me at all. Thoughts?
You said name of the Doctor and time of the Doctor?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So skipping over day of the Doctor.
Specifically, I do like the day of the Doctor.
Okay.
I think it's hard to dislike it.
I think it's pretty easy, but I'll get into some of my qualms with the day of the Doctor. It's a separate qualm I have than with those two. I
have problems, but I overall don't dislike them. I rather liked the name of the Doctor as a lead-in to Day of the Doctor, and learning what works for me. Obviously, it's a cover band-aid for not being able to get Eccleston back at the time. But the revelation of there's a version of the Doctor, and this is something I do like, and I think Moffat does this quite well. And it's built into Tennant and Davies' era a little bit, of the Doctors have opinions about previous versions of themselves, both appreciation and dislike. And the notion that there was a version that the Doctor dislikes so much that they want to actively pretend they don't exist. I rather liked that, personally.
I'll talk about that when we talk about Day of the Doctor. Specifically, I want to keep with the name of the Doctor, though, which is something of note here is we also meet River at the furthest point of her timeline, which is after the library, which was not something we'd seen before, because she projects herself into Clara's mind, thanks to Vastra. And I don't much care for that, because it kind of like caps off, like, Angels Take Manhattan is the last time the Doctor sees River. It's not just the last time that the audience sees River, it's the last time the Doctor sees River before she goes off to the library and dies. And so like, so we see River, the next time we see River is in this post the library moment, which I don't really care for. The Whisper Men, I think, are kind of Moffat trying too hard to recreate the silence and the angels and that sort of thing. So they don't really work for me on that level. And having like the great intelligence there to do this thing of like, what's the oldest question in the universe? Doctor Who. It's like, that doesn't work for me either, because like I never really cared about that idea that he wants to play with anyway. And I don't think he's handling it really well. Going back through Clara going back through the timeline doesn't actually bother me, except for one moment, which is when she tells the first Doctor to take the specific TARDIS. That bugs me, because like that's like specifically like, oh, Clara is the reason why the Doctor uses that TARDIS. I'm not crazy about that. I think that's too much. I think that's Moffat doing too much with like making the Doctor's whole timeline super important, and this kind of like idea of like this kind of like, this companion is important because without this companion there is no Doctor. And I don't necessarily think maybe that's not the case. That's not what he's trying to do, but that's how the scene plays. And it's the whole kind of like conceit of the episode doesn't really like work for me, of like creating this idea of like, and I'll be honest, like creating this idea of, and this is my last statement that I'll say before I'll stop talking. Creating this statement of like, this is the Doctor's resting place, this is where he dies, is all fine. And I don't necessarily mind that, except when paired with Time of the Doctor, when we learn that it is 11's resting place. This is where 11 dies in this great, grand, glorious battle. Like that, it just felt like, once again, like we're doing this running away from his death kind of thing that we already did in the last season. It just, there's a lot of stuff in these two episodes that just don't work for me.
I don't disagree about Time of the Doctor. I don't have a lot of things I would say about that, where I felt like that was, there's a lot of things I don't like about Time of the Doctor. But as far as Name of the Doctor, I agree with you about the river thing. I kind of forgot about it because I think I've kind of pushed it out a window to not think about it. I also don't like that we get a river post the library thing like this. If you're gonna take River out of the library, take River out of the library and make more stories. I feel that way about it. But I like the concept of like the grave. It's my entire timeline, and the gray intelligence steps into it. I liked the William Hartnell thing. I thought it was cute. Well, and I'll be to be fair, and like it's been a long time, but my read was that it wasn't that she was the person who told him to take the TARDIS, but that the Great Intelligence was setting him up to take the wrong TARDIS. Because like the idea is that the Great Intelligence has slipped back in the timeline to change all of these moments in his life so that every victory is a failure. So taking the TARDIS that is meant to be his companion is like a victory. So she's undoing what the Great Intelligence is doing rather than like doing the thing that's always been true. That was my read, but I also haven't watched it in a long time. So
I understand that. There's just the last thing I want to say on that one specifically is that like it creates this like it goes away too much from the I just stole whatever TARDIS was unlocked and just started running. Like that's what I did. It takes away from that for me. But you know what? You could be absolutely right. That could be the read that's intended. The way the scene plays out for me, I don't see it that way, but I do like your read. What about you, Xander? What do you think about the Name of the Doctor?
I don't got a lot of really good opinions or things to say on on kind of the last two episodes really of 12's run.
11,
my bad. It's getting late. It doesn't feel like the wrap up for his character. And I feel like part of it is because his character was kind of lost in the like what I mentioned before with Good Man Goes to War, the whole kind of like, I'm cool, but these are atrocities thing. I don't know. It just like I was really hoping that there would be. I guess what it was for me is that it felt like a letdown.
Yeah.
It felt like the things that were kind of like closed and set up and done were done, but it was kind of like just because they had to be, Yeah, it's unfortunate because I did feel mostly disappointed by like a lot of it.
Yeah.
I think more so probably in the Name of the Doctor more than the Time of the Doctor. Granted, the Time of the Doctor pulls into really my most hated instance of so much time passes for the Doctor. X amount of time passes.
Yeah.
And I'm it's just like they've done it so often, and that I think like if that had been the only time they did it, I would have been like, okay, this feels like this works. This feels like it's this, there's a little bit of congruity in here, but it just felt like more of this like unresolved plot line of him just like running away, really. And it
Yeah, and there's a lot in Time of the Doctor also that I really don't like, which is just like the Church of the Silence. We see their origin in this episode, in the Time of the Doctor, and that's really just kind of like, what do we do? What was it like? Really, like,
yeah,
it's such a throwaway nothing that I'm just like, this doesn't make
oh,
any sense to me.
yeah.
I will say though, Olga Brady is the head of the church. She plays a Romulan in Star Trek Picard season 1 and 2, and she's gorgeous. And I was happy to see her in Doctor Who.
Um, let's pivot to Day of the Doctor real quick so that
Yeah.
we kind of Doctor out
We
into
pivot. Yeah.
the proper
Yeah,
Mhm.
let's do it. The Day of the Doctor. I like the Day of the Doctor. I don't love the Day of the Doctor though.
I think I probably love it, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
There's a lot of instances, there's a lot of moments in the Day of the Doctor I love. I don't know if that would mean I like the whole thing. I do think the kind of like Gallifrey painting at the end didn't really do it for me. But there's a lot of instances in it where I'm like, okay, no, I vibe with this. A lot of the interactions were great. I thought kind of like finally coming around to that idea of like multiple doctors together, um, which we saw in the one Christmas special. Um, it plays more with that, and I'm like, you know what, I like this. I specifically like it it's the one instance that makes me kind of like feel a bit better about um 11's the problem I've been mentioning this entire time. um there's one instance that to me makes it feel a little more validated and a little more like congruent with the story, but it's too late. It is at the end of his run. It's too late
Yeah.
to even start addressing it. But they do, for the single line where the War Doctor asks how many children died on Gallifrey, and Tennant answers, and Smith says he doesn't remember. And that to me like finally plays a little bit into like his more, his more playful nature, but also more of his like that he's basically ignored this like tether that was keeping him from having these more like grandiose actions. And it's like, cool, there's one line that feels like maybe we could justify some stuff, but like it's too late. It's one line. It's, it doesn't really make up for everything, but it is kind of, I want to say, the saving grace of that situation.
For me, and I want to get Sparks' thoughts on this one more specifically. For me as a concept, the War Doctor on paper is a good idea, but in execution, I don't think works. It's it to me accidentally, and I don't think this is the intention, but for me, it accidentally projects all of the Time War stuff onto someone else. This is no longer something that I have to deal with. It's now something that you did, and I can put all of that onto you as a, you did that, not me. You did that, and I don't love the execution of it. I do kind of like the idea of it, but as far as execution, I'm not crazy about it. Does that make any sense?
Yes, I hear you. I just don't agree with it,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
So my take on that real quick, just to because I know Sparkz is gonna probably be a little bit more than what I have to say. I don't mind it because of what we've already seen. We have 9 and 10 say I did it. I'm the one that, killed them all. There's the personal responsibility is taken. I like the idea of the War Doctor as like the attempt to say, "Oh, I can't be the doctor if I'm going to do something this terrible." And it being more about having to drop that mantle and what that means to the character rather than I get to just blame him.
Sparkz.
Yeah, I mean, I mostly was going to say a similar thing of like, I think the responsibility has been stated by the previous iterations and by 11 himself, that I don't feel like it's them washing, like hand wringing themselves of like, this is not on me, this is on the War Doctor. I find it interesting. Like, I think that you could have done the exact same thing and had it be the Ninth Doctor in his place, and like that wouldn't necessarily absolve them of the responsibility for it. It would just be like, you're the person that did it. And like there's a way of like, again, getting back to that, the doctors having opinions about their previous iterations, like regardless of if it might have been the only decision from their perspective at the time, he's the one who did it. And like having to live with both, like that's a version of yourself, but also there's a specific face you can look at and be like, that's the one. That guy. That guy's not like the rest of us because of what he had to go through. And like he's born in and dies in war. And like more than any other doctor. And I think like that kind of separation, I think is a good idea. And I think they, considering that we all know it's a very thin decision in lieu of not having Eccleston to play the part. I think it's a good choice.
I am going to mask off because there's a very specific reason why I don't like the War Doctor, and it is superficial. And I do have legitimate, like non-superficial reasons why I don't like the War Doctor that I have stated many times. But over all of them, here it comes. It should have been the Eighth Doctor. It 1000% should have been Paul McGann. Christopher Eccleston should never have been in the conversation for the War Doctor. It should have been the Eighth Doctor. There is no reason why the Eighth Doctor is not the War Doctor, other than we didn't feel like it. Russell T Davies always stated that the Eighth Doctor was meant to be the War Doctor. He was the one who used the moment. There's a comic about it. It doesn't make any sense to me. That's the mask off. That's the superficial. That is my 1000% reason for why the War Doctor doesn't work for me. Like I said, that's the illegitimate. Doesn't matter. It's stupid. It's the hill I will die on for the rest of my life.
It's your Paul McGann agenda.
It's my Paul McGann agenda. But there it is. Now again, that is not to say that the opinion I expressed, the non-superficial opinion I express, is not how I feel. It is, but but that is the reason overall that I just cannot get over the War Doctor.
Davies also has said that the woman in The End of Time was meant to be the Doctor's mother, but like,
yes,
what does that even mean in this new age of timeless children? So like,
so we will get into the Doctor's Moffat changing the Doctor's status from being from a wealthy family to being from a poor family in when he goes back to Gallifrey in the next era. Which I find interesting. But yeah, go ahead, Xander. Sorry.
Was that like, was that whole thing from Davis like stated that it was like supposed to be his mother, or was
There's
it left open? Like, was that more like?
So he has this like specific comment where he says like obviously a lot of people have a lot of wonderful theories out there that I think are there and great and everything, and he's like, and I prefer it be open-ended. And he has like this long sentence where he acknowledges all the theories that he thinks are wonderful about it and all this stuff, and he's like, and I really think it should stay open-ended, but also I think it's very clear that it's intended to be the Doctor's mother. Like, that's how he also ends the sentence, and it's like, okay, so like you prefer for everyone to think whatever they want to think, but in your opinion that is the Doctor's mother.
Right.
I mean,
okay.
it could be the person that they give the Doctor to after they wipe his mind.
Sure. I
become the first Doctor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we know he had a childhood. He has a childhood that he remembers on Gallifrey. So he was regenerated as a child.
And I'm guessing this is all 13 stuff.
Yeah,
the timeless children thing is.
We'll get there. We'll get there, Xander. My only point being, like, Davies can say whatever, like stuff that doesn't make it, like, whatever shows up in the show. That's like, that becomes hard canon.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
and I'm
just as much as anything else. I'm not. We don't need to belabor the thought. You love Paul McGann. I think that's perfectly legitimate. I wouldn't. I just as I said earlier, I would have no problems with them treating Eccleston the same way they treat the War Doctor. I would also have zero problems with them treating Paul McGann the same way they treat the War Doctor, as like, you are the person that did it, though. Like, but my only rebuttal to that is I do find it a very relatable idea that, like, obviously we don't all have regenerations, but we do have like these eras of ourselves that we can recognize where like we were a certain type of person. And I can very much empathize with it, looking at one version and going like, I'd rather not talk about or acknowledge that version of me ever existed.
Now, but my last thing I will say about the Paul McGann thing is that, like, they don't acknowledge Paul McGann anyway. Like, not really. There'd be an image or something, but like, it would be kind of interesting to see that, like, this was the Doctor that, like, where we saw him, because like part of it is like, I believe it would be stronger if it was a Doctor that we had met before, that we're like, oh shit, we're now seeing them in a completely different light, and like Paul McGann fits that bill for me anyway. Rather than just introducing a new Doctor of like, oh, you never knew about this one, but this is the one. Again, I on paper, the concept of the War Doctor is good and fine, and I have really no problems with it, but in execution I'm not crazy about it.
I think there's also an amount of, again, going back to the popularity of the time, and no one thinking that Paul McGann is very popular unless you really like that movie or you listen to the radio shows, but like in general suspecting that the wider audience is not going to give a shit. Like, this is, again, like coming at that time where like most American audiences and around the world are catching up on Doctor Who and didn't watch that movie, don't really know who Paul McGann is, and certainly they can learn the internet exists, but like his appearance isn't going to excite people. The idea of someone like, you never even knew this guy existed, everyone goes, what? Like, and
I think probably that was the intention at the time, but like I think we've probably learned, because of the popularity of the Night of the Doctor short, which I love. It came out before this anniversary special. It has Paul McGann. That's Paul McGann's regeneration episode, which we never saw before. That became so popular, there was a rallying cry to create a spinoff of Paul McGann, a TV series. I think probably that mentality is not the case anymore, but surely at the time when this was being, when the Day of the Doctor is being filmed, that was certainly the mentality.
Yes, I'm not speaking from a fan perspective. I'm speaking from the BBC perspective, where
right,
they
100%.
go, nobody really cares about Paul McGann, which isn't true. And like, obviously they've kind of recognized that the classic Doctors hold a special place for everybody, even if they haven't engaged that much with all that history. And I think that you can see even into the Capaldi era how there's kind of a shift in the thinking on that. But I think that also part of what happens here is that we're rubbing up against like this being a story, a good story to tell, and this is also a 50th anniversary special. And like, there are things that they are choosing to do because they are doing it because it is the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who. And I think that's the same with the William Hartnell moment we were talking about earlier. I kind of go, cool, take your little moment with that because, it's the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who when that airs.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. Finish that.
So I think that like because those things are in conversation with each other, that's why you get so much of this. Would it have been Paul McGann? Well, they kind of want it to be Eccleston because they want to celebrate this era of Doctor Who initially, right? And like it's all about making the most of this big thing that they want it to be, which I think as a anniversary special, it's quite successful.
Yeah. Xander.
Do we want to move to thoughts overall on 12 on the run?
Yeah, sure.
Well,
or on 11.
I want to say some quick things about the 50th that I do like.
Sure.
And then I'll be done. Which is one, I think the Zygon plot line is incredible.
Yes.
I love the Zygon plot line in the 50th. It comes back in the Capaldi era, so I'll talk more about that then. Because I do really like that. The stuff with the curator makes me hate the stuff on Trenzalore more. I love the curator idea of the Doctor kind of regenerating into these past faces of himself and growing older in his retirement. And if the Doctor knew that he could do that, why was he scared to die on Trenzalore? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And
that I fully agree with. Like the whole time of the Doctor handling of the Trenzalore stuff really doesn't work for me.
Yeah. I think David Tennant and Matt Smith have incredible chemistry. They're really fun to work. They're really fun to watch together.
Yep.
I love all the banter, the written banter stuff. It's very funny. It's very good. That's pretty much it, except for one last thing, which I forgot to mention about the snowmen. It introduces my favorite TARDIS design.
Sure.
Which is Smith's second TARDIS design. I think it's incredible. It carries over. It gets better in Capaldi's era, so I'll talk about it more then. But I love it anyway. Yes, I think pretty much that covers everything I really wanted to say about everything. Yeah. So final thoughts.
I think Day of the Doctor is lovely. I think it's again as a 50th anniversary special, it really works. Genuinely, I kind of sit back and look back on it a little befuddled that it's not just the end of Smith's time as well. It's a little odd that we go from that into but also here's Smith's regeneration special. And I feel like that only comes from a place of feeling like they have to give him his own moment, just like Tennant gets his. And I just, the more I think about it and look back on it, I'm like, I think it would have been more powerful if Smith's story ends at the end of Day of the Doctor for whatever reason that you come up with, that it forces a regeneration. I understand that we're already seeing a regeneration in that because we see the War Doctor into the 9th, but I just don't think Time of the Doctor adds anything for me. Really. And it's such a bummer because I think Smith has some wonderful, lovely lines on his way out the door. And I think that his run is unfortunately marred by
his last monologue is very good.
I think his run is marred so much by such mishandled writing, but he's so charismatic and lovely as the Doctor that I feel like he's done a disservice that the Day of the Doctor 50th anniversary special is really his best last showing. And I don't think Time of the Doctor does him the service that they wanted it to. By focusing only on him, I don't really think it does that in a nice way. And that also kind of sums up my thoughts on what's happened with Smith. And I think Smith is brilliant. I think that he's quite appealing. I think he is a Doctor kind of crafted, at least in his early seasons, for engaging with children and bringing everyone to the table for Doctor Who. And I think I won't even say in a better showrun, set of seasons and stories, but one where the pressure of the phenomenon that Doctor Who was as he stepped into the role hadn't been thrust upon him and Moffat. I think his run would thrive much better, not having to meet every demand of what the weight of Doctor Who was throughout the entire time he was the Doctor, because I don't think anybody had as much pressure on them as the Doctor as him in the New Age. He enters with it and he exits with it. It is always heavy duty pressure on him to nail it.
Xander, I want you to go next.
Yeah. I've got some complicated thoughts on Matt Smith's run. He has so many good episodes. I feel like he really, really, really shines in the like small, more like controlled stories, the like single one-off episodes, the two-parters. I feel like he brings a lot to the character that wasn't really there. You know, it I think the fact that it does seem like a little more high energy, a little bit more silly, you know. It hurts me that that wasn't his entire character, you know. Um and that's not particularly his fault as a doctor. Again, there was a lot of pressure. He was coming off of you know, David Tennant, which by that point everybody recognized as the doctor. You know, like it's not even a thing where you're looking back. It's a thing where in the moment, you know, people were just like, okay, well, who's gonna follow that up? You know? And then the pressure of following that up, the pressure of having a completely new team doing everything, the international stuff, the phenomenon, it he had so much working against him, and even with that, I think he pulled off a really like a really solid run. You know, I think my own, you know, grievances with the character itself and some of its like plot lines and some of its like overarching arcs, that aside, it's still strong. You know, like I can't go in there and be like, oh yeah, because of this and this season's not worth it. Or, you know, it's like my problems with it are, oh, I didn't really vibe with this, or I didn't particularly care for this. Not, no, this was awful, shouldn't have been in here, was a travesty. This episode had no value. Um yeah, you know, I mean, even all the river stuff, like it it feels bogged down because it's like you're disconnected with this character you're getting to know,
Yeah.
you know? And it's difficult that like he had so much stacked against him. And I think he pulled off a character that is like still very memorable. Like there are a lot of people who Matt Smith is their favorite doctor, you know, and I can't look at that and be like, no, I don't really see it. It's like, no, yeah, I get it. I could see why he's your favorite, you know. It's weird to kind of wrap up with that sentiment because I do feel I've been kind of harsh on not just his character, but like I think his run in general as we've been going through this. Um, but a lot of that does come from a place of like really loving the show and like hoping to have seen more, you know, hoping to have seen something better.
If I may, just to that, I think that two things happen in relation to what you're saying, which is that Matt Smith is very good at Doctor, even when the material isn't. And I think the other part of it is that there's so much potential on the table at this time, and I think it's very clear when it misses the mark of what it's capable of. And I think that was just very obvious to us. One other thing that we didn't really mention that I just want to, I know Brandon would say the same, and so would you, Xander, I suspect. Murray Gold is in his shit this season in making the score. Musically, this is some of the best stuff in Doctor Who is in this run in these seasons.
Yeah,
it just is.
Smith has my favorite Doctor theme.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's solid. Yeah. But yeah, just to kind of like I guess wrap up the whole thing for me. Smith is a good doctor. He's a good doctor that is just bogged down by I think in essence underutilizing him
Yeah,
in the ways that he could have been.
sure.
And I said a lot of great things about Smith, but ultimately the thing I've been waiting to say is he never really worked for me as the Doctor. Not in the way that I wish he did. And he's not the first Doctor I'm going to say that about either, which is a hint for the next time we talk about this. I think that Smith has a lot of good episodes, and it's not his fault. I think he's good as the Doctor. I think he's very fun. He's clearly got a great idea for what he wants his Doctor to be, but as a written version of the character, it doesn't work for me because of what Moffat is trying to do with the character, which is constantly making him into this godlike warmongering character that it's just not who I want the Doctor to be. Right. And I don't, so much of practically every every season long arc doesn't work for me at all. River is a huge mistake in my head of just constantly like thinking about this and being like, wow, how could you blunder that so badly? The Trenzalore stuff, the Pandorica, like none of it works for me. And I wish it did. I really wish it did. And because like then I would look at Matt Smith a lot more favorably. And again, not to say that I dislike him. He just doesn't connect with me the way I wish he did. And that's fine. I do like his final like speech at the end of the Time of the Doctor. I think it's a good one. But ultimately, like, I can't say it's the weakest era for me, unfortunately. But it is the one that I wish I liked more. The last thing I'll say about that is, on his way out, he worked for me. He started to work for me a lot more. Like he had the TARDIS design. I like his suit. I like his outfit better towards the end of his run.
Sure.
But by then it was too late.
I didn't like. We didn't talk much about outfits, but I did not like once we abandoned the fifth season outfit. What we got in the sixth season, like I really liked what he picked out in the fifth season, and I don't think his outfits got good again until, as you said, in the seventh.
I like the vest with the long coat and I like that. I like his season 7, his season 7B outfit.
Yeah.
All right, that'll do it.
That'll do her.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us on this. The next time you see us, we'll talk about Peter Capaldi and Jodie Whittaker, which will be a very fun episode. So stay tuned. So that'll do it, guys. This is Fake Nerds Watch. There's plenty more Fake Nerds Watches for you guys to check out. Go to fakenerdpodcast.com just to find links to everything. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, click the bell icon to get notified whenever we put up episodes. We're putting up a lot of episodes right now, so stay tuned for those. Again, go to fakenerdpodcast.com to see the list of all the episodes of all the shows that we put out, of all the episodes that we put out, all the links that you can find in there. That's all there. And if you want to support us financially, check us out TeePublic and Patreon, which are linked below, and on our website at fakenerdpodcast.com once again. Yeah. Okay. Find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Fake Nerd Podcast. FakeNerdGuys@gmail.com if you'd like to get in touch with us personally. I'm at BT McClure on Instagram and Twitter, where you can also find me writing for AtomicGeekdom.com. Sparkz, where can people find you?
You can find me eagerly anticipating talking about 2 wonderful performers as the Doctor on our next outing at Sparkz Witty on Instagram and Twitter, SPARKZ Witty.
And Xander.
You can find me in the eternity between blinks. Also, at Jack in the Box on Twitch.
All right, guys. So that'll do her. Stay tuned for plenty more stuff. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, subscribe on all the podcasters of choice, rate and review it. And until next time we see us, guys, stay fake nerds.